to get the best performance out of that car. And we must respect ourselves and do the same. That's the first aspect of balanced nutrition. On the second one, I'll just focus on balance and proportions. And I think that is where the big debate lies, is what is the proportions and what should we eat? To me, it is to balance 20% of our diet. If this is our plate of food, 20% of that should be our complex carbohydrate. Complex carbohydrates is our sweet potato, butternut, our starchy veg, our whole grains, brown rice. And then 20% should be our protein. That can be animal and vegetable source of protein, our free-range eggs and pulses, our beans. And then 10% must be fats and oils. But 50% on our plate should be our salad vegetables. And every meal should be balanced like this. There's a lot of variation to this theme, but for me the realization came that this is how our body composition looked like. We are made of 60% water. 60 to 70% of our body composition is water. And this is our water phase. There's no water in protein, fats, and oils. So, and then also this is very micronutrient dense. So we need all those micronutrients to sustain, like I've explained, our system. So the bulk of our diet, this is supplying the fiber, the water, and the micronutrients. Our body composition is 20% protein. So it made sense proportionally that that's the amount of protein we should get from our diet. And we shouldn't be more than 10-12% fat. That's the ideal body composition. So it makes sense that proportionally that should be our fat intake. Just also to note that complex carbs, proteins, and fats are all acid forming, whereas our salad and vegetables is alkaline. And it's therefore very important to balance the acidity and alkalinity in our diet. One would typically think just for breakfast in the morning, one can start with a lovely frittata with loads of salad of vegetables in that frittata with free-range eggs, or an omelette with a lovely vegetable filling, or a smoothie made with fermented kefir milk and coconut and seeds and nuts in there, and berries and a banana and dates. So to have a variety in every meal. And then there's a big question and the argument about raw and cooked. I believe in balance. I don't believe in any dietary extremes. So 50% of our diet should be raw, where 50% of our diet should be cooked. When we expose food to heat, we destroy our enzymes and most of our vitamins. But many of our minerals are better absorbed from cooked food, like lycopene in tomatoes and carotene in carrots. So today I'll have it cooked in a stew or a soup, and tomorrow I'll have it raw in a salad. So the first point is God made these versus man-made, and then the importance of having balanced proportions and variety in our diet. And last but not least is our water intake. Most of people are just chronically dehydrated. It doesn't mean coffee and alcohol or sodas. We need to have a good purified form of water. We need 300 milliliters of water per 10 kilogram of body weight. So it depends on body weight how much water you'll drink. An average person of 60 kilogram will drink around 8 glasses of water to sustain and properly hydrate the system. Thank you.
This case started with civil society. In other words,
we dealt with an informant in this case. This case would most probably have never have been if it wasn't for that individual that provided that first information of the crime. Now, that individual also provided the information on 3 prior cases, but he provided the information to the wrong people, the 14 officials that were corrupted within the case. And the information went to the officials, back to Arnold Benches and his crew. Now you know, we received that information and we've made it a success story. But we couldn't have done that on our own. J.D. Kotze, he's here. He was the head investigator of the Scorpions at the time. Brilliant, excellent investigative skills and capacity. They took the case to the next level. The Asset Forfeiture Unit, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Department of Justice in South Africa, the US attorneys, Marcus Asnan, the first prosecutor prosecuting this case. He's present in this room. An honor and a privilege to have all the role players here today. He's here today. He played a crucial role. What I'm trying to illustrate is, it cannot be one person's work. One person, in 1990, I started in this work. Then you could work alone on the coast, everywhere. You could work alone then, not now. Fisheries crime is organized crime. Now, there's the US attorneys, the US customs. We went over. You couldn't believe it. We worked with NOAA in 2001. We're busy with a second case similar to Houtpay. We cannot talk about it because the case is current. But the level of cooperation, unheard of. Both customs, I mean, you pick up a phone. There's no MLAT in place. We're still busy. It's taking us almost 2 years to get the MLAT, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty in place. But I pick up a phone, and believe you me, within a few hours from the US, the United States, we'll get a document, and we can start working on it. And that's a type of cooperation, and those are the agencies that cooperated to make this case a success. I've briefly touched on the successes. If you look at the case started, when we got that first information of the crime, there was Patagonian toothfish, South Coast rock lobster, West Coast rock lobster tails within the container. A second container was intercepted in the US. South Africa had a plea agreement with the accused here in South Africa. Only, not for the entire period of destruction or mass illegal harvesting, but only for a 2-year period. And that is one of the lessons that we can learn from this case, is don't go back where they started their illicit activities. You start the last 2 years. We're busy now, I touched on a case, we're busy with a case where we went right back, you know. And yes, it's good to do that as well, to illustrate the extent of the damage done. But we only did, went back in this case for 2 years. And the outcome in South Africa was fines and forfeiture in excess of 44 million South African rand. It still remains the biggest case ever. But the US did an excellent job, and they put the main culprit in prison. If I may mention his name, Arnold Benches. And you know, I always tell the new or the younger FCOs, fishery control officers, I always say, you know, I saw Dennis Fredericks was here yesterday. I don't know if he's here today, but the two of us, and Dennis was our legal man at the time, and the two of us confronted Arnold Benches. Now, he corrupted 14 officials in this case. And on this specific day, I stood in front of him. I can't recall what I said, but I can't recall the words that I said, but I think it must have been something like, this is it. This is your takedown. And It must have been something to that effect. But the success story about this, I've got 2 pictures in here. One of the photographs was taken in 2001. That is when outdoor fishing was surveilled by us, the department, trying to build a case at the time. And just below that, we've got a photograph just below that with the South African coat of arms on the same building. This needs to be our story. Our story where we converted a crime scene into a government building. You know, and every time when I walk into that building, I get almost emotional, and my colleagues don't understand. But there is a lot of history behind this building, and you know, ironically, this is also the building. Today there's a Pakisa meeting. Now Pakisa means hurry up. And the Pakisa project, Initiative 5, Marine Protection Service and Governance, it's a new project, if I can put it like that, an initiative by government driven by the President of South Africa. We instructed government, you will work as one unit, fighting maritime crime, fisheries crime, and unlocking the economic potential of the ocean. Now that's the Hout Bay fishing case. What was also good, not illustrating the excellent operations, but what was also good was the South Coast Rock Lobster at the time was in threat, was under tremendous pressure because of this company overfishing. When we took them out, I believe still till today, that resource has turned around and has displayed a positive growth. And that is what we need to do, not only to abalone, rock lobster, but all the other resources as well. You know, within South Africa, there are multiple cases. Today, there are 3 cases within the High Court. Also another process of unheard of work, where there are 3 cases currently running within the High Court in South Africa. They are abalone cases, but they syndicate-related organized crime cases where I cannot talk on it, they can't, but from the attorneys who represented the suspects or the accused in some of the cases, even them are charged, or at least one is charged in this case. And you know, we've got numerous successes, foreign vessels, foreign fishing vessels, we're closing illegal fish processing establishments, and at times seize in excess of 100 tons of abalone per annum. That's not good enough. And never have we ever, until 2006, addressed, although we've tried, but we just couldn't break through to the illegal consignment. And in 2006, we had this specific case, also with joint partners. We searched the cold storage, a stone throw from where we're gathering today, and we seized a number of abalone in this premises. We did a forensic investigation and we found, and a very fast one, because you cannot take months, you know, in an evening. And we found consignments 3, 4, 5, and 6 en route to Malaysia and Singapore and destined for Hong Kong. We returned all of them successfully, and this is one of the marked cases where we developed the process of getting those illegal consignments back to South Africa. You cannot turn that. It is the Cape Town Bridge. We were so excited that vessel came in Durban. We waited for that vessel to come in Durban because we were cautious of the syndicate members getting hold of the containers. But you cannot turn a ship like that around, a multi-million-dollar ship. But we've developed the method of getting the containers back. The value of it was 11 million rand South African value. If that had to be sold, it would have been sold for 66 million between 66 and 100 million in the Far East. Same. We've consignment 7 and 8. A premises here in Table View was searched, also a legal abalone processing establishment. And we found abalone to the value of 5 million rand at this premises. And we did the same. We went through the documentation. We went through all. If there's a name, if there's a IP address or anything, we would go through, and we found these containers en route. It didn't reach its destination in Hong Kong, but we got it back, and the previous one that I mentioned was exported illegally as pilchards. Now, if somebody exports pilchards, it would have been fine at the time because you didn't need an export permit for the pilchards at the time. We've closed that gap that you need a permit for any fish. But it was exported as pilchard. These consignments were exported as polypropylene pellets. And I'm not going to repeat the figures, you can actually see it up there. But there were a total of 18 of those bales, each bale weighing 1 ton, containing, so it was about 18, 19 tons of polypropylene pellets. Now you can imagine a normal FCO fishery control officer. How is he to inspect that container? If you do inspect it, you need a forklift to unpack it. If you unpack it, polypropylene pellets flows like water if you open that bag. You search, you find nothing. Only 8 of those bags had the abalone in. So it just shows you the extent that they actually go to. I'm only touching on a few cases, and this is also one of significance, is also through the information network. We've learned that the AFCD, the Agriculture and Fisheries Department of and Conservation Department of the Administrative Region in Hong Kong, seized the container, and that's all we had. And we picked up the phone. Marcus Bergner put us in contact with Charles Kuhn of the AFCD, and we got his phone number, and we phoned him, and he said, no, it's not him, it's at the Maritime and Customs Command. And we phoned and we never stopped. And we told them, listen here, do you have a container? Yes, we do. And but that container is illegal. It's people have been deprived of a livelihood, and we told them the truth. And they started cooperating with us. And through the information that we received from Hong Kong, we found that the same syndicate sent another container through. We intercepted that container and returned it successfully. What was interesting in this case, and I must mention it, is that we valued that abalone at about just over 2 million, about 7 million South African rand. The Hong Kong authorities, the independent auditor, they valued the same container, which we returned successfully to South Africa at over 27 million South African rand. At that time, the Hong Kong dollar was almost similar to the South African rand. And the accused, they were going to fight this case. And we arrived at this court here, the Chu Sen Magistrates Court in Hong Kong. And we thought, you always hear of an official committed suicide flying out of a building in Hong Kong. And we thought of something like that, and we thought, no, we need to take state security, we need to take the police with it. And at the end, we were only 2 officials, and we went to fight that case, and we got a conviction. And yes, I think it was 2 weeks later, that same group that you're seeing there of the Ports and Maritime Command, they had a massive success of ivory and rhino horn imported illegally into Hong Kong. Somebody mentioned yesterday we need to extend the cooperation. Where is Hong Kong? Where's mainland China? Where's Taiwan? Anybody here? Anybody from the Far East? That's one of our challenges. A last case, same thing, same principles. Consignment exported premises identified in South Africa. 3 suspects arrested. Container on its way to Singapore. We applied the same principles, got it back. Malaysia, excellent cooperation at first, but we've lost that container. With regards to the foreign fishing fleet, there are some major cases underway. We cannot speak about them. They're current. But through the years, we've been working tirelessly. People have worked, has put in a tremendous amount of work. People like Dino Govender. I cannot mention all of them, but everybody that worked on this case, everybody, we are grateful to everybody that participated and brought these cases to the extent where they are. They're not finalized, they're still ongoing. But the success here is that seven of those vessels, the Bahari Nusantara's and the Bintang Sumudra Gelantos and Makotia Bada. You know, Yves de Koning that opened the ceremony yesterday, we went to Houtbay, and the picture below was taken last Friday. And South African owns 7 of those vessels now. And vessels that has been fully involved in IUU fishing, human rights violations, human trafficking, IUU fishing, fisheries crime. They are now owned by South African with the intention of providing a platform to disadvantaged coastal communities to focus not on abalone and rock lobster, but let's secure the offshore tuna resources, which are more sustainable, and focus on that. Instead of an IUU vessel benefiting from it, let a whole community like Paternoster or Austin or Houtbay benefit from those resources through that action. 2 of those vessels, which makes it 9, have absconded right under our noses, but we're taking it with a pinch of salt, and those cases are currently being pursued as well. Tremendous work is being done, and we're hoping that in next year's symposium that we'll be able to report and to say similar like Mr. Benjes, here are the suspects, the convicted behind the case. Then the Harm 4 case done by Polo, FCO within the department, brilliant work done, continuous hard work, and that case was also brought to the point where asset forfeiture seized or forfeited the vessel. The challenges, I've touched on some of them, but you know, on our notice board within the MCS offices, we've got a notice board there with this media clipping. And it states that the South African economy is losing 4 billion per annum as a result of illegal fishing. We sat with Marcus Bergner from Traffic now recently, and that figure is still modest. You know, if you take it the value, somebody mentioned, I think it's Gunnar mentioned yesterday, if somebody steals something, theft is theft. Somehow it doesn't apply to South Africa, because we know of cases where 300, that syndicate that I mentioned last, sent out 10 of those containers. We managed to intercept 2. Most of them are sitting within the Far East. 8 stolen and taken out of the country. It's people's livelihoods stolen. And you know, I wonder if we would take the same approach if it was money, US dollars, diamonds, or gold, because it's the same thing. You know, it's the same, different commodity, same principle. And I could not believe, I could not agree more with Gunnar that theft is theft. We need to address this. This is one of the key challenges, you know. We're losing 4 billion rand per annum. And that statement is only based on the abalone and the West Coast rock lobster and the demand within the eastern markets. We're not talking the hake, the other fisheries. We're just talking 2 out of 22 sectors. There are 22 fishery sectors in South Africa. In the same article, UCT, a UCT study by Serge is also mentioned, where he confirms that about 3,000 tons of abalone is exported to the Asian markets illegally. Traffic confirms this by saying it's between 2,000 and 3,000 tons annually. If you convert that in a monetary value, it's tremendous. The One Earth Foundation of the Fisheries Crime Working Group of the Indian Ocean Forum on Maritime Crime estimates that 18% of the total fish harvest within the Western Indian Ocean and 32% of the total catch in the Eastern Indian Ocean are either illegal or unreported. This is about 50% just in the Indian Ocean alone. It's a challenge. What are we doing? We are the fisheries crime fighters. We are the international community. Similar to the Hout Bay fishing case, we need to bring that figure down. Despite the numerous successes, thousands of consignments with illegally harvested inshore South African resources still reach their destinies as we speak, today undetected. And we need to change that. Fisheries crime syndicates, I've mentioned it, are well structured. It's challenging and difficult to identify these syndicates. They operate without boundaries, and no legitimate rules apply to them. They are organized crime. Stealing, robbing poor coastal communities within South Africa, Africa, and other countries of a livelihood. We as a global community, the challenge is for us to fully cooperate with the global enforcement community, and we need to address IUU fishing and its related activities, not only within the South African exclusive economic zone, but on the high seas, both in a reactive and proactive manner. It remains challenging and costly. You know, the Thunder case was, if we're a partner, we can do the enforcement.
Other forests that do not grow in this area, that are the same type of forest, and they occur in Paraguay as well. They are on sandy soils, and the forest is the one that provides for its own nutrition. The forest and the processes amongst the interactions between the forest and the abiotic of the let's say the land, they produce the fertility to sustain all that life. Once you retrieve that, then once you burn it, basically, the soils become completely impoverished in 1 or 2 years after that. And then you have to start adding all kinds of fertilizers, and the only thing you're left with is probably the temperature and the rainfall. But still, the business speculators, they think they can make money out of everything, and they have a right to make money out of everything. So they go and clear those forests that took thousands of years in achieving their climax. Well, governments actually lately, this last decade, have been promoting logging. Yes, they have legislation that legitimizes logging and clear cutting also, and they say, well, you cannot expect people to do without the resources produced in forests. So in a sense, they are much more interested in the revenues from exploiting forests than in conserving forests, because of the values of having forests, which are not only aesthetic values, but are very important for the stability of the climate in the world, for the stability and to create the conditions for life in the planet. All the water cycle, most of the freshwater cycle is linked to the functionality of forests. You cannot just go and plant trees and pretend that those are forests. Hence, you cannot just go and cut them and pretend that nothing will happen. You'll see, and we are seeing desertification processes all over the world, and that's mainly because the functionality of the forests have been eliminated by cutting the forest or by replacing them by tree plantations that can never be compared with a forest. The composition of a plantation is basically just one species taking huge swathes of land, and the composition of a natural forest is very different. The trees are, let's say, 1% of the whole composition. You got all kinds of different little animals creeping all over the place in the soil. The epiphytes, other plants, the shrubs, the undergrowth. That is life, and that is what's creating fertility. That's what filtering the water. That's maintaining the water so we don't have droughts or longer drought periods. So all of that is gone when you destroy a forest, and none of that is back when you just plant trees.
It's a convenient lie.
Yeah, we think carbon markets are a way through which rich entities and rich countries can continue emitting carbon dioxide. So the lie is that by paying someone to conserve forests, that will make any difference in the situation of the greenhouse balance in the atmosphere. For every hectare of forest you save, you are definitely doing something positive for the environment. But for every ton of carbon you emit, you're definitely causing harm. So those things shouldn't be linked together. Forests, as I said at the beginning, should be conserved because the Climate Change Convention already obliges countries to protect forests. They refer to the forests as sinks. Okay, they can call it that way, but they should protect them. And if you just pay money on top and continue emitting, you're not really tackling the problem, which is the emissions of greenhouse gases, namely CO2, carbon dioxide. So that's the main problem. So it's a very convenient lie because they are boasting, oh, we're going to save the forest with this, and we're going to get money for keeping our forests. But what they don't tell you is that they will continue emitting, and that the effects of those emissions are taking the whole planet to a very, very dangerous situation. We are reaching what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change called dangerous climate situations. And we've been living in that danger for already quite a while now. If you look at any newscast, they'll tell you nearly every day of climatic catastrophes around the world, hurricanes in Central America, southern U.S., landslides in Peru due to unexpected rain, off-season rain, much stronger typhoons in the Pacific and in the Indian Ocean. All of that is nothing but the consequences of climate change. And the main reason for that climate change are the carbon dioxide emissions of industrialized nations and industrializing nations. So for that reason, already common sense told these people to negotiate a convention that says, okay, let's go out there and conserve our forests. So we don't need any more trading or any more horse trading. We should just go and fulfill the the mandates of the convention.
In other words, we should save the forest and stop the
Oh,
emissions.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think there's never been more confusion in this modern life than ever before about what to eat. We have such an oversupply of food, but yet again so much confusion about this diet and that diet and all these fad diets going around, and all the scientific information coming out. And for me, there's only three dietary guidelines that we should adhere to, the three most important guidelines that we should apply in our everyday eating. And the first one is to eat God-made, not man-made. So food in its most original, unprocessed form is good for us. And to explain that in another way, to elaborate a little bit about that, I think also the main thing is we don't realize that food should be our medicine. So the importance of food and the role it's playing. What is this God-made opposed to man-made, and how will it affect us? I have an analogy that I explain it, but maybe to step back and just ask ourselves, why do we eat food in the first place? And I think that one of the main reasons is comfort. It's social. Every social event we eat. It's a habit. It's 1 o'clock, I must eat. But the main reason, if we think about it, is for energy. Food is there to sustain us. So we eat for energy. And if I feel low in energy, low in spirit, I crave that something. And typically, somebody would eat a chocolate. Now, what happens is that chocolate, the sugar in the chocolate is converted down to glucose. And that is turned in our system into energy. Now, there's millions and billions of cells in our body. And in every cell, all these chemical reactions is taking place to convert sucrose to glucose to energy. It's not a chocolate coming out the other way. So it's phenomenal what this body can do. There's more than 7 trillion chemical reactions that take place in our body every second. It's phenomenal if we think we like this huge factory, and all these, the most clever computer is our human system. Now, every single one of these chemical reactions taking place need a specific enzyme to catalyze those reactions, to make the reaction happen. The enzymes, again, need specific vitamins and minerals, otherwise they can't do their job. Now, enzymes we inactivate at 48 centigrades. So anything that I've processed that's gone through a heat treatment won't have any live enzymes in them. Another analogy is we can look at a fire. A fire needs air. It needs the oxygen to burn. And then the glucose, that's our carbohydrate. That's the energy source. That's the firewood to build that fire. So I have a nice stacked fire, and I have enough oxygen around that fire. But what do I need to get that fire to burn? That would be a match to light and strike that fire. That is the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals to spark those reactions into reality. Now, we can also look at the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats, but the carbohydrates as the petrol for your car. Okay, so our car needs petrol to perform, and it's an energy source, but it also needs oil. That's the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals. The micronutrients is the oil to keep that engine functioning. Now, if I eat my chocolate, the sugar is converted to glucose, and this is turned into energy, and it sparks more than 7 trillion chemical reactions per second, each needing an enzyme, vitamin, and mineral. Then we have to ask ourselves, these enzymes, vitamins, and minerals, are they in the chocolate? I'm talking about a normal chocolate bar. Would there be any live enzymes? If we think that enzymes are destroyed at 48 centigrades, there would not be any life. And there's hardly any vitamins and minerals in that slab or that bar of chocolate. Now, if it's not in the chocolate, where will my body get these nutrients to help my body to convert the sucrose to glucose to energy? Because I'm not eating an apple with the chocolate, supplying it. It will take it from other places in my system. Our skin is the largest organ, not the most active, so we won't steal from our heart or our liver, but we'll first take nutrients from the skin. And that's our first sign of aging. We start to get wrinkles. And then we'll start to take nutrients from our bones. And as we age, nutrient density, bone density decrease and osteoporosis, and we get all these bone fractures and problems. And then just where there is a fire, there's always smoke. So we have a lot of metabolic waste. So there's free radicals and a lot of waste that is generated by this processes happening in the system. And this imbalance we create on a cellular level is all the degenerative diseases we struggle with today. It's diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, chronic fatigue. Because if I have a sick cell depleted of the essential enzymes, vitamins and minerals, and a toxic build-up, and it's not getting the air and the water and the fuel source, that cell's going to be sick. And if I have a sick cell, I have a sick organ, a sick system, and a sick body in the end of the day. So we have to look what we put into our body. Anything that you put in your mouth, you must ask yourself, am I now giving to my system, or am I actually taking away? We think of that chocolate as extra kilo on the hip. We don't see it as something that's actually depleting the system of nutrients. Now, if we think of sugar cane, it's a live plant growing there with all the enzymes, vitamins, minerals, the fiber. Everything is in that plant that's needed to convert the sugar, the sucrose, to glucose, to energy. But what do? It's that white sugar stripped away and isolated, refined and isolated and stripped away of all these important nutrients. So if we think that's the bulk of what we eat is carbohydrates, but it's this processed carbohydrate. It's also in our grains, in the hull or the husk, the outside layers of the grain, where we have the most nutritional value. And with all the processing and refining, we lose all those nutrients. It's white rice, it's white pasta, it's pizza in the morning, pizza for lunch or supper. It's white bread. It fills our tummy, it gives us some energy, but it doesn't have these important nutrients. If you have a lovely red Ferrari, and I tell most of my clients, you're a beautiful red Ferrari, you would value that car. And you'll make sure you put the best grade petrol in there, the best, but also oil. What's going to happen to that car if you don't put oil into the engine? It's going to seize sooner or later. But we do that on a daily basis to our own system. I'm going to just mention the rest of the list of factors that has a negative impact on our system. If we look at smoke, nicotine is a stimulant, so it stimulates reactions, but it's not supplying nutrients to support that stimulation. It will deplete a lot of zinc, it will increase heavy metal cadmium, and it will also deplete lots of vitamin C from the system. So it's not only tar on the lungs, but I create a lot of imbalances in my system. If we look at alcohol, in red wine, there's a high sugar content. The sugar needs to be metabolized and broken down. The alcohol needs to be metabolized. It stimulates a lot of reactions. It's put a lot of stress, the phenols, on my detoxification channels. And it needs nutrients. It will need enzymes, vitamins, and minerals to support those, which is not supplied by the alcohol, by the wine, or the beer that I drink. So I deplete nutrients from my system. And the same with caffeine. That cup of coffee that I drink in the morning to kickstart my engine gives energy, it gives that boost, but it's not supplying the nutrients to sustain and maintain. Also, the problem with alcohol and caffeine, it dehydrates the system. It has a diuretic effect, and that will even furthermore wash nutrients out of my system. And then if we look at additives, all the colorants and flavorants and preservatives that's added to food, all these synthetic chemicals. My body is so uniquely designed. If you think of 7 trillion chemical reactions that can transform a chocolate to energy. But now I put this strange, funny, synthetic molecule or chemical inside my body. Your cells don't know what to do with that. So it stores it in the fat cells, and there they build up and they accumulate. Many of these chemicals are carcinogenic. They will cause cancer in the long run. They build up in our system, and they put a lot of stress on the liver to try to break that down and to detox it, taking more nutrients from our system. And something like tartrazine will bind to zinc, so it depletes more nutrients. And then if we look at medication, because many people don't relate illness to food. If we're ill, we go to the doctor and we get a drug to treat us. But medication will treat a specific symptom. If I have a headache, I will drink a pain pill. But I don't have a headache because I've got an aspirin deficiency. It will simply block a pain reaction, or it will stimulate another reaction. But it's not addressing the real cause of why I have a headache. It's most probably because I dehydrated, magnesium deficient, or toxic blood circulating through my head. And then just another factor. Last but not least is stress we're exposed to in our daily life. We don't every day run away from a lion and breathe fast and your heart beats fast, but it becomes like a chronic internal stress, just our everyday lifestyle. It's like driving that red Ferrari at high revs. So you'll burn more petrol, more oil, and more exhaust fumes. That whole acceleration of the aging process. It's important to handle stress, body, mind, and spirit. So not only to eat good food, but emotionally and spiritually balance my life and look at a healthy life. And then eating God-made, God-given food in its most unspoiled form. That's my fruits and vegetables, supplying the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals. We're supposed to eat 5 to 9 different fruits and vegetables per day, just to supply the enzymes, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, the oil for my car, to keep my car going. Usually I limit it to 2 fruit a day. It's easy to eat 7 bananas and fruit salad, but it's the kale, broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts, celery that we don't eat on a daily basis, which is nutrient dense. So it's important to focus and realize this is the oil for my car to keep my engine going. I think today the big problem is we don't get the right nutrients into our diet. We don't eat the fruits and vegetables we suppose, and the quantities we suppose. And even if we do, they're devoid of nutrients. Some of the oranges has 0% vitamin C in them because they hybridized, they're seedless, they're picked when they're grass green, the soil is depleted, and they're shipped around the world twice before they land on our plate. But we're not eating the food we suppose, they're devoid of nutrients, plus we do all these negative factors that's further depleting nutrients from our system. So we have a double negative. We're not getting the nutrients, we have these habits that's depleting more nutrients from our system, plus we bombard our body with toxins and drugs that's foreign to our system that our body can't work and can't cope with. So this will just give us that whole perspective on why it's so important to eat food in its most unspoiled form, nutrient dense. And just think of your red Ferrari. You'll put the best grade of petrol, okay, like the manufacturer of that car has intended, and oil to get the best performance out of that car. And we must respect ourselves and do the same. That's the first aspect of balanced nutrition. On the second one, I'll just focus on balance and proportions, and I think that is where the big debate lies, is what is the proportions and what should we eat? To me, it is to balance 20% of our diet. If this is our plate of food, 20% of that should be our complex carbohydrate. Complex carbohydrates is our sweet potato, butternut, our starchy veg, our whole grains, brown rice. And then 20% should be our protein. That can be animal and vegetable source of protein, our free-range eggs, and pulses, our beans. And then 10% must be fats and oils. But 50% on our plate should be our salad vegetables. And every meal should be balanced like this. There's a lot of variation to this theme, but for me the realization came that this is how our body composition looked like. We are made of 60% water. 60 to 70% of our body composition is water. And this is our water phase. There's no water in protein, fats, and oils. So, and then also this is very micronutrient dense. So we need all those micronutrients to sustain, like I've explained, our system. So the bulk of our diet, this is supplying the fiber, the water, and the micronutrients. Our body composition is 20% protein, so it made sense proportionally that that's the amount of protein we should get from our diet. And we shouldn't be more than 10-12% fat. That's the ideal body composition. So it makes sense that proportionally that should be our fat intake. Just also to note that complex carbs, proteins, and fats are all acid forming, whereas our salad and vegetables is alkaline. And it's therefore very important to balance the acidity and alkalinity in our diet. One would typically think just for breakfast in the morning, one can start with a lovely frittata with loads of salad, of vegetables in that frittata with free-range eggs, or an omelette with a lovely vegetable filling, or a smoothie made with fermented kefir milk and coconut and seeds and nuts in there, and berries and a banana and dates. So to have a variety in every meal. And then there's a big question and the argument about raw and cooked. I believe in balance. I don't believe in any dietary extremes. So 50% of our diet should be raw, where 50% of our diet should be cooked. When we expose food to heat, we destroy our enzymes and most of our vitamins. But many of our minerals are better absorbed from cooked food, like lycopene in tomatoes and carotene in carrots. So today I'll have it cooked in a stew or a soup, and tomorrow I'll have it raw in a salad. So the first point is God-made versus man-made, and then the importance of having balanced proportions and variety in our diet. And last but not least is our water intake. Most of people are just chronically dehydrated. It doesn't mean coffee and alcohol or sodas. We need to have a good purified form of water. We need 300 milliliters of water per 10 kilogram of body weight. So it depends on body weight how much water you'll drink. An average person of 60 kilogram will drink around 8 glasses of water to sustain and properly hydrate the system. Thank you.
This case started with civil society. In other words, we dealt with an informant in this case. This case would most probably never have been if it wasn't for that individual that provided that first information of the crime. Now, that individual also provided the information on 3 prior cases, but he provided the information to the wrong people. The 14 officials that were corrupted within the case. And the information went to the officials, back to Arnold Benches and his crew. Now you know, we received that information and we've made it a success story. But we couldn't have done that on our own. J.D. Kotze, he's here. He was the head investigator of the Scorpions at the time. brilliant, excellent investigative skills and capacity. They took the case to the next level. The Asset Forfeiture Unit, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Department of Justice in South Africa, the US attorneys, Marcus Asner, the first prosecutor prosecuting this case. He's present in this room. An honor and a privilege to have all the role players here today. He's here today. He played a crucial role. What I'm trying to illustrate is, it cannot be one person's work. One person, in 1990, I started in this work. Then you could work alone on the coast, everywhere. You could work alone then, not now. Fisheries crime is organized crime. Now, there's the US attorneys, the US customs. We went over. You couldn't believe it. We worked with NOAA in 2001. We're busy with a second case similar to Hot Bay. We cannot talk about it because the case is current. But the level of cooperation, unheard of. Both customs, I mean, you pick up a phone. There's no MLAT in place. We're still busy. It's taking us almost 2 years to get the MLAT, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty in place. But I pick up a phone, and believe you me, within a few hours from the US, the United States, we'll get a document, and we can start working on it. And that's a type of cooperation, and those are the agencies that cooperated to make this case a success. I've briefly touched on the successes. If you look at the case started, when we got that first information of the crime, there was Patagonian toothfish, South Coast rock lobster, West Coast rock lobster tails within the container. A second container was intercepted in the US. South Africa had a plea agreement with the accused in South Africa, only, not for the entire period of destruction or mass illegal harvesting, but only for a 2-year period. And that is one of the lessons that we can learn from this case, is don't go back where they started their illicit activities. You start the last 2 years. We're busy now, I touched on a case, we're busy with a case where we went right back, you know. And yes, it's good to do that as well, to illustrate the extent of the damage done. But we only did, went back in this case for 2 years. And the outcome in South Africa was fines and forfeiture in excess of 44 million South African rand. It still remains the biggest case ever. But the US did an excellent job. And they put the main culprit in prison. If I may mention his name, Arnold Benzes. And you know, I always tell the new or the younger FCOs, fishery control officers, I always say, I saw Dennis Fredericks was here yesterday. I don't know if he's here today. But the two of us, and Dennis was our legal man at the time, and the two of us confronted Arnold Benzes. Now, he corrupted 14 officials in this case. And on this specific day, I stood in front of him. I can't recall what I said, but I can't recall the words that I said, but I think it must have been something like, this is it. This is your takedown. And it must have been something to that effect. But the success story about this, I've got 2 pictures in here. One of the photographs was taken in 2001. That is when Outway Fishing was surveilled by us, the department, trying to build a case at the time. And just below that, we've got a photograph just below that with the South African coat of arms on the same building. This needs to be our story. Our story where we converted a crime scene into a government building. And every time when I walk into that building, I get almost emotional, and my colleagues don't understand. But there's a lot of history behind this building, and you know, ironically, this is also the building. Today there's a Pakisa meeting. Now Pakisa means hurry up. And the Pakisa project, Initiative 5, Marine Protection Service and Governance, it's a new project, if I can put it like that, an initiative by government driven by the President of South Africa. We instructed government, you will work as one unit, fighting maritime crime, fisheries crime, and unlocking the economic potential of the ocean. Now that's the Hout Bay fishing case. What was also good, not illustrating the excellent operations, but what was also good was the South Coast Rock Lobster at the time was in threat, was under tremendous pressure because of this company overfishing. When we took them out, I believe still till today, that resource has turned around and has displayed a positive growth. And that is what we need to do, not only to abalone, rock lobster, but all the other resources as well. You know, within South Africa, there are multiple cases. Today, there are 3 cases within the High Court. Also another process of unheard of work, where there are 3 cases currently running within the High Court in South Africa. They are abalone cases, but they syndicate-related organized crime cases where I cannot talk on it, they can't, but from the attorneys who represented the suspects or the accused in some of the cases, even them are charged, or at least one is charged in this case. And you know, we've got numerous successes, foreign vessels, foreign fishing vessels, we're closing illegal fish processing establishments, and at times seize in excess of 100 tons of abalone per annum. That's not good enough. And never have we ever, until 2006, addressed, although we've tried, but we just couldn't break through to the illegal consignment. And in 2006, we had this specific case, also with joint partners. We searched the cold storage, a stone throw from where we're gathering today, and we seized a number of abalone in this premises. We did a forensic investigation and we found, and a very fast one, because you cannot take months, you know, in the evening. And we found consignments 3, 4, 5, and 6 en route to Malaysia and Singapore and destined for Hong Kong. We returned all of them successfully, and this is one of the marked cases where we developed the process of getting those illegal consignments back to South Africa. You cannot turn that. Is the Cape Town Bridge. We were so excited that vessel came in Durban. We waited for that vessel to come in Durban because we were cautious of the syndicate members getting hold of the containers. But you cannot turn a ship like that around, a multi-million-dollar ship. But we've developed a method of getting the containers. But the value of it was 11 million rand South African value. If that had to be sold, it would have been sold for 66 million, between 66 and 100 million in the Far East. Same. We've consignment 7 and 8. A premises here in Table View was searched, also a legal abalone processing establishment, and we found abalone to the value of 5 million rand at this premises. And we did the same. We went through the documentation. We went through all. If there's a name, if there's a IP address or anything, we would go through, and we found these containers en route. It didn't reach its destination in Hong Kong. But we got it back, and the previous one that I mentioned was exported illegally as pilchards. Now, if somebody exports pilchards, it would have been fine at the time because you didn't need an export permit for the pilchards at the time. We've closed that gap that you need a permit for any fish. But it was exported as pilchard. These consignments were exported as polypropylene pellets. And I'm not going to repeat the figures, you can actually see it up there. But there were a total of 18 of those bales, each bale weighing 1 ton, containing, so it was about 18, 19 tons of polypropylene pellets. Now you can imagine a normal FCO fishery control officer. How is he to inspect that container? If you do inspect it, you need a forklift to unpack it. If you unpack it, polypropylene pellets flows like water if you open that bag. You search, you find nothing. Only 8 of those bags had the abalone in. So it just shows you the extent that they actually go to. I'm only touching on a few cases, and this is also one of significance, is also through the information network. We've learned that the AFCD, the Agriculture and Fisheries Department of and Conservation Department of the Administrative Region in Hong Kong, seized the container, and that's all we had. And we picked up the phone. Marcus Bergner put us in contact with Charles Kuhn of the AFCD, and we got his phone number and we phoned him, and he said, no, it's not him, it's the Maritime and Customs Command. And we phoned and we never stopped. And we told them, listen here, do you have a container? Yes, we do. And but that container is illegal. It's people have been deprived of a livelihood, and we told them the truth. And they started cooperating with us. And through the information that we received from Hong Kong, we found that the same syndicate sent another container through. We intercepted that container and returned it successfully. What was interesting in this case, and I must mention it, is that we valued that abalone at about just over 2 million. No, excuse me, about 7 million South African rand. The Hong Kong authorities, they had an independent auditor, they valued the same container, which we returned successfully to South Africa at over 27 million South African rand. At that time, the Hong Kong dollar was almost similar to the South African rand. And the accused, they were going to fight this case. And we arrived at this court here, the Chu Sen Magistrates Court in Hong Kong. And we thought, you know, you always hear of an official committed suicide flying out of a building in Hong Kong. And we thought of something like that, and we thought, no, we need to take state security, we need to take the police with it. And at the end, we were only 2 officials, and we went to fight that case, and we got a conviction. And yes, I think it was 2 weeks later, that same group that you're seeing there of the Ports and Maritime Command, they had a massive success of ivory and rhino horn imported illegally into Hong Kong. Somebody mentioned yesterday we need to extend the cooperation. Where is Hong Kong? Where's mainland China? Where's Taiwan? Anybody here? Anybody from the Far East? That's one of our challenges. A last case, same thing, same principles. Consignment exported premises identified here in South Africa. 3 suspects arrested. Container on its way to Singapore. We applied the same principles, got it back. Malaysia, excellent cooperation at first, but we've lost that container. With regards to the foreign fishing fleet, there are some major cases underway. We cannot speak about them. They're current. But through the years, we've been working tirelessly. People have worked, has put in a tremendous amount of work. People like Dino Govender, I cannot mention all of them, but everybody that worked on this case, everybody, we are grateful to everybody that participated and brought these cases to the extent where they are. They're not finalized, they're still ongoing. But the success here is that seven of those vessels, the Bahari Nusantara's and the Bintang and Sumudra Galantos and Makoti Abada. You know, Yves de Koning that opened the ceremony yesterday, we went to Alpe, and the picture below was taken last Friday. And South African owns 7 of those vessels now. And vessels that has been fully involved in IUU fishing, human rights violations, human trafficking, IUU fishing, fisheries crime. They are now owned by South African with the intention of providing a platform to disadvantaged coastal communities to focus not on abalone and rock lobster, but let's secure the offshore tuna resources, which are more sustainable, and focus on that. Instead of an IUU vessel benefiting from it, let a whole community like Paternoster or Austin or Hout Bay benefit from those resources through that action. 2 of those vessels, which makes it 9, have absconded right under our noses, but we're taking it with a pinch of salt, and those cases are currently being pursued as well. Tremendous work is being done, and are we hoping that in next year's symposium that we'll be able to report and to say similar like Mr. Benjes, here are the suspects, the convicted behind the case. Then the Harm 4 case done by Paulo, FCO within the department, brilliant work done, continuous hard work, and that case was also brought to the point where asset forfeiture seized or forfeited the vessel. The challenges, I've touched on some of them, but you know, on our notice board within the MCS offices, we've got a notice board there with this media clipping. And it states that the South African economy is losing 4 billion per annum as a result of illegal fishing. We sat with Marcus Bergner from Traffic now recently, and that figure is still modest. You know, if you take it the value, somebody mentioned, I think it's Gunnar mentioned yesterday, if somebody steals something, theft is theft. Somehow it doesn't apply to South Africa, because we know of cases where 300, that syndicate that I mentioned last, sent out 10 of those containers. We managed to intercept 2. Most of them are sitting within the Far East. 8 stolen and taken out of the country. It's people's livelihoods stolen. And you know, I wonder if we would take the same approach if it was money, US dollars, diamonds, or gold, because it's the same thing, you know, it's the same, different commodity, same principle. And I could not believe, I could not agree more with Gunnar that theft is theft. We need to address this. This is one of the key challenges, you know. We're losing 4 billion rand per annum. And that statement is only based on the abalone and the West Coast rock lobster and the demand within the eastern markets. We're not talking the hake, the other fisheries. We're just talking 2 out of 22 sectors. There are 22 fishery sectors in South Africa. In the same article, UCT, a UCT study by Serge is also mentioned, where he confirms that about 3,000 tons of abalone is exported to the Asian markets illegally. Traffic confirms this by saying it's between 2,000 and 3,000 tons annually If you convert that in a monetary value, it's tremendous. The One Earth Foundation of the Fisheries Crime Working Group of the Indian Ocean Forum on Maritime Crime estimates that 18% of the total fish harvest within the Western Indian Ocean and 32% of the total catch in the Eastern Indian Ocean are either illegal or unreported. This is about 50% just in the Indian Ocean alone. It's a challenge. What are we doing? We are the fisheries crime fighters. We are the international community. Similar to the Hout Bay fishing case, we need to bring that figure down. Despite the numerous successes, thousands of consignments with illegally harvested inshore South African resources still reach their destinies as we speak today undetected, and we need to change that. Fisheries crime syndicates, I've mentioned it, are well structured. It's challenging and difficult to identify these syndicates. They operate without boundaries, and no legitimate rules apply to them. They are organized crime. Stealing, robbing poor coastal communities within South Africa, Africa, and other countries of a livelihood. We as a global community, the challenge is for us to fully cooperate with the global enforcement community, and we need to address IUU fishing and its related activities, not only within the South African exclusive economic zone, but on the high seas, both in a reactive and proactive manner. It remains challenging and costly. You know, the Thunder case was presented yesterday. South Africa is part of Interpol. We work tirelessly around trying to get, for 3 months, to get hold of that vessel. Sea Shepherd, Bob Barker, and the other vessel. Brilliant work. My opinion, a challenge to us as fisheries crime fighters. Government needed to be there, even if we were just alongside. We wrote Nick Frey, we wrote submissions, and we tried our best. We couldn't get a vessel out there. Let that be a lesson for us. Let it be a lesson learned. That, yes, it's a brilliant success. South Kiln pursued that vessel. Mainly pollution charges. Excellent. Yesterday, Alistair announced a guilty verdict. We should have jumped with joy. They charged him similar to the Al Capone strategy. Not for the fish, but for the pollution. You know, there will always be something to get these criminals. You know, and we don't do this for ourselves. We do it for the poor, for the needy. Flag states need to fully cooperate and share information. Flag states are doing a brilliant job, but there's some that's completely absent, you know. If we don't have the resources, other countries might have it. If we're a partner, we can do the enforcement. IUU vessels remaining on the high seas for extended periods, that's a big challenge as well. And we need to shift the focus away from the vulnerable inshore fisheries resources like your abalone and lobster. I've touched on this. There are better resources, more sustainable resources, and get the communities. Yesterday it was mentioned, we need to focus on those resources, you know. Send the community, provide that platform, you know. We need to work, the biggest challenge, in a multi-agency, in an integrated global approach to address the real issues. Similar like we've done in the Hout Bay fishing case. Although the Hout Bay fishing case is still current, the restitution action is being appealed, and although the case started in 2001, it's still current. We need to be able to speak about all the other cases as well. in a multi-agency approach. You know, preserving our fish. And that way we can address poverty and the unemployment rate. Thank you.
An interesting development and an opportunity is that the press about fisheries products being tainted with forced labour and slave labour has led to 2 class actions in California. One is related to Costco, which is related to the Guardian expose of CP shops having trash fish caught by slave labour, putting it into the food chain through fish meal for scallops and prawns. And the second one relates to cat food, of all things. Cat food that's been tainted by slave-caught fish. And a number of major US brands have been targeted, and we believe, as they're the owner, Thai Union may also be targeted, which could be quite a significant development. It's also clear that retailers are becoming increasingly concerned about their supply chain and their brand, their image. Once it's targeted, it's very, very hard to recover. Another challenge is to reach public perception. Fisheries and what happens at sea is generally out of sight, out of mind. We've been using that for many years in the UN and other areas. But these hard reports from investigative journalists may be overcoming that. And we believe we have an opportunity. But we need to plan how we do it in a coherent way, involving multi-stakeholder participation, involving key governments, and taking the hard decisions and securing the multi-agency cooperation, which is fundamental. There aren't many in this room that could permeate the complex corporate webs which these criminal networks have developed. As has been said, they're not stupid, they're very clever, they've got good lawyers, they've got good planners, they know how to conceal what they're doing. And it is a real challenge to break that veil, but it's a veil nevertheless of what we must break. So I thank you for your attention.
What we need to do is to think beyond the globalized economy. As long as we are going to continue to think that the globalized economy is the economy that we need, then we will continue to have a slide downwards for South Africa. Your nation will not compete in that globalized economy. Just like 185 other nations cannot compete in the globalized economy. So unless we keep on dreaming that we can keep on cutting costs and that we can keep on pressing labor out and we can keep on pressing raw materials down, as long as we're dreaming of that kind of a society, then we know you will be doing social dumping and environmental dumping. Whatever you pretend. Because the business model that we have developed is a business model that was designed in the 1950s as a response to the Second World War. We're not in world wars anymore. We're in an incapacity to deliver the basic services to millions of people, billions of people. We have to respond to the basic needs of people locally. You can't feed people on instant coffee. You can't feed people on genetically modified food. You can't feed, you can't respond, you can't. But unfortunately, there's so many people who've trained to become an MBA, all according to that same Harvard business model, that we become so blinded about the realities that we think it's the only way to go forward. What I want to point out to you is, what do you think happens in the mind of this young boy who's holding his first harvest of mushrooms in his hands? And he knows these mushrooms were farmed on coffee waste from his mom. And his mom is right here. Where is she? There she is, hiding in the back. I mean, what is the mind of a young boy who knows he can take the coffee waste that mom produces, generate mushrooms out of it? And what do you think is his view on hunger? He doesn't believe there's really hunger. He believes there's ignorance on how to combat it. And I do not understand that I have presented in South Africa already 10 years ago a program that in the meantime has 16,000 employees worldwide, where we can take coffee and turn it into substrate for mushrooms, and none of that has been done here in Cape Town. I don't understand you. I don't understand you all. You should get up and do it. And somehow there's this inertia, and somehow there's this desire to talk about it, and to applaud it, but not do it. We need a new concept of moving forward. I'm not here to create comfort. I'm not here to please you. I'm here to make you think and do things, because it's about time we do. And my concept is very simple. That first I have to give you a context, otherwise whatever I say is a pretext. What I'm trying to say is that the whole core business model with the core competence, low marginal costs, labor productivity, economies of scale where we produce more of the same, we source everything out, we have supply chain management, do it just in time, get everything through distribution centers, and cash flow is our king. I tell you, cash flow is king, no one else. We're going to leverage assets, we're going to be competitive by having exclusive intellectual property rights so we can work in this globalized market. The market economy has delivered to me three very clear things. Massive unemployment, communities die, and we consume too much junk. That is the reality of where we are. The vision, though, for me is very different. The vision is that we have to see through and source ourselves and nutrient ourselves with fantasy. We need to look into the world of fantasy so that we can get back to reality. And navigating between reality, vision, and fantasy requires us to look at science and be prepared to take risks. What I'm doing with the Blue Economy is to expose people, to inspire, to change the rules of the game, because I am not prepared to accept the rules of the game. You can't accept the rules of the game the way they're being played now. And therefore we have to go beyond the obvious. I tried this is my factory, the Ecoviv factory. 20 years ago it was inaugurated. But I realized that even though I had biodegradable products, it was an unsustainable factory. Don't buy Ecover. We're using fatty acids from palm oil, and the palm oil has already destroyed over 1 million hectares of rainforest. Don't continue. Stop. Collateral damage cannot be done. We can't accept doing things knowingly that something goes wrong. And I've been working for years in the green economy, but unfortunately I have to come to the conclusion after 30 years of being an entrepreneur in that world, that whatever is green is expensive. It must be subsidized with our taxes, and it's not competitive. Less than 1% of the world economy is green. Less than 1%. Wake up! So then I propose the Blue Economy, which is innovative, where we focus on generating wealth and jobs and competitive. The green is the best we imagined. It's time to do much better. We don't have to analyze the problems anymore. We know them. It's time that we scan for the opportunities. Think positive. even when the picture is not good. I summarized this in the Club of Rome report in 2009. It's now translated in 36 languages, over 1 million copies sold. I know that we can do this differently, but we have to adopt, first of all, a new philosophy of business. The philosophy of business means that we have to have open business systems. Let's inspire ourselves for a second in nature. I mean, have you ever thought about how stupid it would be that if a tree loses leaves in the fall, that we would keep those leaves and reattach them again in the spring? Hey, doesn't make any sense. Yes, we know this doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, we're forcing companies to make bottles out of bottles, plastic out of plastic, paper out of paper. Just exactly like it's stupid to have a tree reattach its own leaves. Second, the basis of our logic must be in the laws of physics. We have embraced chemistry, and now we're going to fool around with genetics. Apply the laws of physics. Most of the things we believe is important will not be relevant anymore. We have to cluster everything. It's over this core business, core competence. We have to be able to cluster things together and substitute something with nothing. Wow, what's that? Well, you all have your cell phones, right? I mean, I do not accept a cell phone anymore that is not operating without batteries. Substitute the batteries with something else. Because there are several forces around us that will make it possible to operate a cell phone without a battery. Starting with the strength of your own voice, starting with the heat of your body, starting with the radio frequencies that are around. All of this is readily available, but somehow the business model means that the companies make more money on the batteries than anything else, and therefore swallow your batteries. I don't get it. 40 billion batteries will be discarded this year. 40 billion. It's insane, and we're still on our phones. We have to start doing things with multiple benefits, not just for one purpose only. Nothing in nature is for one reason only. And whatever we do must enhance life and the commons. Concrete cases. I'm going to give you 5 cases. I'm going to try to take them into the context of Africa. First one, reverse the errors of the past. Sound familiar? We all make errors, so don't continue to accuse. Reverse them. Do better. Here you see the Vichada, land in the eastern side of Colombia, where cattle farmers destroyed the rainforests 150 years ago. Here you see the regeneration of the forests, against all the odds. And everyone who works and lives there only rides the bicycle. Paulo Lugari leads it. After 25 years, this area is self-sufficient in water and fuel. This place where there's no road has resins for export. Normally we think we first have to build a road. Forget about the road. Manufacture competitively. Fuel from the trees is being produced, turpentine. And drinking water, pure solar drinking water, is available for everyone. Those little machines you see here are locally produced, function for 25 years, guaranteed. And what is the result? The result is that before, 70% of the people suffered from gastrointestinal diseases. Today, 0. We are in Colombia. Same number of population as you have, same revenue levels as South Africa has. We eliminated gastrointestinal diseases in this area by simply providing drinking water with a machine that's locally manufactured. You can do it as well. And here is our next project, the pencil. You can see the savanna, which is degraded. You can see those sausages of green, which is the remnants of the biodiversity. And in the back you see the green patch, 8,000 hectares of rainforest regenerated. And out of this, 80% of the trees that we have to take out in order to regenerate the biodiversity, we're going to make pencils. And the pencils are made with the charcoal mixed with the pine oil and made in the wood. But is this really a pencil? Because the whole system that allows you to make this pencil responds to the basic needs of the people, generates topsoil and biodiversity, provides health, free drinking water, renewable energy, social capital, and we compete on price and performance against the Chinese. How come we can do that? Because we don't focus on one income. We don't focus on cutting costs. We're focusing on responding to the needs of people, and out of the blue, not out of the blue, by planning, we have these additionals. Social housing. This country needs 1 million homes, at least now. This is not about communism or capitalism. This is not about cement or bamboo. But at least here's an initiative that has worked. You're seeing the largest bamboo structure in modern history, which I constructed in Colombia. And this is the second version of it in Germany. We constructed it with a German building permit. That means the whole building technique is vetted by German construction engineers. But here you see how we've translated that know-how in rural housing. Rural houses that are good for 100 years. Because they're preserved by the same bamboo. Because the bamboo has 25 meters, 6 serves for construction, 19 is to make charcoal, and the gases of the charcoal impregnate the bamboo and make it immune to fungus and insects. You use the chemistry of the bamboo to preserve the bamboo. Now these are beautiful houses. But more importantly is the social housing. You see the luxury version of a $14,000 home, 2 stories. 2 stories in Colombia. But then you see the simple version, the $950 version in Guayaquil in Ecuador. People come with $50. 2 days later they have their home standing. The company is running this in Guayaquil, has a simple purpose: eradicate shanty towns. And we're doing it at the rate of 42 a day. 42 a day, you can calculate what it means in 3, 4, 5 years. This is a $12 million business. It turns out $1 million a year in profit. 15 years after we started the first bamboo pavilion, there are 250 companies created, 42 social houses per day per company. And while we're doing this, we need more bamboo. So we are regenerating the bamboo forests. And if you have a bamboo forest, you regenerate topsoil and you have the hydrological cycles re-established. It's simple, it's embarrassing simple, it works. I don't know why you have such great difficulty in delivering. It doesn't have to be with bamboo. But what I do know is that time has come to respond to the basic need for housing. And we have to get back to traditional agriculture. The most devastating destruction of Africa is the destruction of traditional African agriculture. Like the white man has done in Latin America, like he tried in Asia, but in Asia failed. Let's go for a moment to Bhutan, where I do a lot of work. One of the projects in Bhutan is to save buckwheat. Buckwheat, which is farmed at 3,000 meters altitude for the past 6,000 years, is threatened by globalization because the Ukrainians, they can offer buckwheat at $180 a ton, and the Bhutanese, well, unfortunately, it costs them $2,000. And of course, that if we even listen to the most advanced economic thinkers in social development and sustainable development, they will say, I'm so sorry, at $2,000, you better start thinking about something else. And I'm saying no, change the business model. So what is our model? Our model is that we're licensing the production of beer. Production of beer? Yeah, I'm Belgian, okay? We have great beers. So we're licensing the production of beer, first in Japan, where we're extracting the malt. We're making malt extract from the buckwheat. That means that 92% of the buckwheat stays in Bhutan, and only 8% is used to export. What stays in Bhutan includes the protein. Now, buckwheat, I don't know if you know it well, you farm it, you plant it, 3 to 4 weeks later, you harvest it. no need for pesticides, no need for herbicides, because buckwheat behaves like a weed. You see the beautiful buckwheat field in Bumthang in Bhutan. And then what we have done is we set out people to harvest wild yeast. And so we're packaging wild yeast plus the extract from the malt, and we sell the license to the Japanese. And here is the Powell beer sold in Japan. What is interesting about this is that we're getting a 5% license fee. Now, if you're getting a 5% license fee, guess what is the price per ton for the buckwheat? $4,000. I'm out competing Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians with their Chernobyl background, I don't think they can sell their image very strong when you turn it into beer. Bhutan, in this way, can pay double prices to their farmers, preserve culture and tradition, and buckwheat, the healthiest that there is, and the most evident anti-diabetic food is therefore preserved in the Himalayas. Let me give you two very concrete cases on South Africa. This is a project of mine that failed in South Africa. It's the Lisbon farm just outside of Kruger Park. Anyone knows about the case of the Lisbon farm? Yeah. Scandal, the way it was managed. I tried. But here's the model that I had. The Lisbon farm was told it couldn't compete anymore in the globalized market of citrus fruits. And therefore the suggestion was that they should become a bit more competitive by laying off half the people. Have you heard that before? It's exactly what we think we should do. Cut labor. Labor is the culprit, right? Not productive enough. Wrong. The Lisbon farm proposal that we had in pilot project implemented is we take the fruits, we make the juice is sold to the lodges, the peels of the fruits are used to extract the D-limonene just with steam that gives the detergents. The detergents are used to offer laundry services to the lodges. Then the fruit, the trees have to be pruned, and the prunings, plus the removal of the non-native, are used to farm the mushrooms, give beautiful firewood to the lodges, and even some wood for construction. The prunings, after having farmed the mushrooms, are enriched in amino acids and are great animal feed. And 60% of the food at the lodges is never eaten, it's just there to be beautiful. So people get an appetite. So we said, get some pigs, have produced biogas. The result of the model that we designed, it gives you 9 sources of income instead of 1 income. Unfortunately, greed came in the way, and egos came in the way, and they decided to destroy the whole project. We're implementing it elsewhere now. Citrus farms should have 8 revenues and don't care about the world market price of citrus. That is competing on the global market.
We know that we can't solve climate change without an energy revolution. 64 to 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from power generation or uses of energy. You've got to fix energy if you're going to solve climate change. In addition, this intersection of energy security, food security, and water security is becoming real. And therefore, you may, to answer your question directly, the markets, we can deal with the market issues, for sure we need to do that. But we need to go down a little bit more if we're going to address energy poverty and its linkages to the other Millennium Development Goals. So what do we need to do? It is clear, we need clear, for every country we need energy plans. We're not talking about pilot projects now. You don't need an energy strategy over 10, 20 years to do a pilot project. But we're beyond pilots. We need to scale up, we need to move fast. The emissions are great. So for that speed, you need to bring in the private sector without a plan. They will not come. Energy investments are big, they're costly. Private sector needs confidence that there is a strategy over 10, 20 years, because these investments are supposed to last 50 or more years. So you need a plan in a country. You need stable, predictable policies, because these are long-term investments. We also need to do renewable resource mapping. We're trying to sell clean energy to countries. Some don't even know what the concrete potential is that they have. How much solar radiation? What is the wind map? Some countries don't have as yet. We need those elements if, in fact, we're really going to have a scaled-up deployment of clean technology. Of course, the money issue is important. You need good financing. Which countries is this working? As we speak, South Africa is making a big statement here. It is not in the negotiating room, but it's right outside. They're launching SARI, the South African Renewable Energy Initiative. Clear plan, clear map. Just a few weeks ago, they launched a request for proposals for 3,750 megawatts for clean energy. That's real. That's not imagined. And there's innovative financing, using donor money to de-risk private capital that they need. Morocco, brilliant example, almost approaching 100% energy access, but at the same time, they're planning to sell energy to Europe using clean technologies. The Desertec initiative is real. You have leading companies in Germany, Siemens, leading financial institutions, KfW, Munich Re, all part of it. Brazil, the new president has her initiative, Electricity for All. Because for her, before becoming president, she was leading the social programs to reduce poverty. She knows, as a former energy minister, without access to energy, people remain poor. They cannot produce, they cannot store food, they cannot pump water, and it's mainly the women who suffer. Finally, the same comment that Corrado made about China. Thanks to China, the cost of solar panels have dropped 30–40% in 5 years. Thanks to China, we see ambitious investment programs in China for clean energy in their 12 five-year development plan.
A lot of lessons that people had learned and applied before modern technology have in fact the solutions to some of the most profound problems that we have created for ourselves. And so the whole notion of using human waste to replenish through biogas, through nutrients, and through all of the things that we thought we could simply flush away with clean drinking water, and it would cease to be a problem anymore, created a new set of problems that we're having to resolve. And I was particularly impressed by Jason's insight that having leapfrogged the era of the landline in telecommunications to mobile technology and everything that means for interaction and communication, so Africa might well leapfrog the Industrial Revolution with all of the devastation that it brought in so many ways into the Sustainability Revolution. I thought that was a very interesting concept, because Africa has leapfrogged the era of landline communication. It never came to sub-Saharan Africa in any extensive way. And today, out of Africa, especially places like Kenya and Uganda, are coming the most extraordinary applications for education, for healthcare, and a range of other government functions that are based on mobile because the alternative is not there. And in countries where the alternative is there, often that migration to the extraordinary potential of mobile has been much slower. And equally, I think Africa will show the world that it is an entirely false dichotomy to say you can either go for green or go for growth. It's an entirely false dichotomy to say the choice is green or growth. If you're stuck in the ways of the past, that may be a choice if you see the trajectory as a continuation of industrialization of the past. If you make the mind shift that we have to make, green becomes growth. And that is why we talk about the green economy. And that is why we talk about building a manufacturing sector based on the green economy and the needs of the future. And so I was particularly interested in that theme and spent a little bit of time last night reading the wonderful books and literature we had. I also wanted to pick up the theme that Belinda Walker raised on what do cities do. Now, it's absolutely true that in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, cities provide all of the basic things that human beings cannot be expected to provide for themselves, like electricity reticulation systems, like water purification systems, like sewerage systems, like road networks and public transport. And where that stops and the responsibility of individuals begins is a major question. Is it the role of a government to provide everyone with a toilet? Is it the role of a government to provide everybody with a geyser? These are major questions that need to arise because one has to talk about the alternative pressures on a budget and what the role of the government is and what the role of individuals and individual families and communities may be. But leaving that aside, I understand the core role of cities to be to link individuals with the national economy and to link the national economy with the global economy. And therefore cities and provinces and regions, but cities are much more important than provinces. Cities who understand the role of green and the compatibility between green and economic growth and don't see it as a contradiction are going to play a leading role in ensuring that citizens make the crucial choices that we need to make to reduce our carbon footprint at the same time as finding ways in which and pioneering ways in which to grow the economy through green investments. And I'm delighted to say that Cape Town has visionary political leaders and visionary officials who understand precisely what we're talking about when we talk about the green economy, and they understand how to make green integral to growth. Because our number one priority in this province and in South Africa has to be growth and jobs. I was fascinated to read on page 6 of the Cape Times that wind is now the cheapest form of electricity generation, with an average price of 89 cents a kilowatt hour compared to 97 cents per kilowatt hour for Eskom's new coal-fired power stations. And this comes from Mr. Roger Price, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Wind Lab, an international wind energy
He is the director of the Institute for Human Health and Performance at the University College London. Hugh obtained a first-class degree in neuropharmacology and cardiorespiratory physiology in 1984. He graduated from the Middlesex Hospital Medical School in 1987. He has since trained to specialist status in general internal medicine, cardiology, and intensive care. He is now professor of intensive care medicine and director of the Institute for Human Health and Performance, University College London, where he leads a research group. He's published over 200 scientific articles, and he has been engaged in climate change and health for more than 10 years. He's written extensively and was a co-commissioner of the UCL Lancet report on the health impacts of climate change. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Hugh Montgomery.
I doubt there's a more important gathering of people in the whole of Durban at the moment than you. And I doubt that I will ever have given a more important talk than that I'm about to give. Because I'm a Brit, though, I need to start with a joke before I get to the serious stuff. So here's my one climate change joke. Not many people know a climate change joke, but I do. So one planet's talking to another planet. And it says, "I don't feel so good. I think I've got Homo sapiens." And the other planet says, "I wouldn't worry, it doesn't last for long." This is where I work, and this is the sort of patient I look after. And sometimes patients like this end up on our intensive care unit dying and die because of some catastrophic event that's befallen them. They're hit by a truck. But far more often, they end up there because they become chronically sick that makes them vulnerable when that second hit arrives. And I'd like to start by giving you a brief outline of the chronic sickness that our world faces before we move on to that second hit. Here's human population. Whoever drew this graph probably got it wrong because humans didn't really turn up until around 140, 150,000 years ago. And there weren't very many of us around. Probably around 70,000 years ago, there were no more than probably 5,000 breeding pairs on the planet. And it took us till around 1804 to get our first billion, and it took well over 120 years to get our next. But as we've worked our way up, we find that we're adding now another billion to our planet every 11 or 12 years. And each of those individuals, on average across the planet, has more money. That's not to say there isn't gross inequity in the world. Those of us, such as me, who live in central London, who fly to COP17s, who carry a mobile phone and use computers, use a vastly disproportionate amount of the Earth's resources than do others in poorer countries. But look at the data here. The amount of money per capita screaming upwards in these 1990 adjusted dollars. World economy in 1990 dollars, 600 billion in 1800, 4,000 billion in 1950, somewhere approaching 61 trillion in 2010, with average earnings per capita around the world rising steeply. The point I'm making is that those dollars are underpinned by resources, the resources that we all hold as common goods, the water, the soil, the rivers, the seas. And we're systematically destroying them. Here are the data just on fish stocks, 1961 to 2003. World population then had grown at 1.8% a year, fish consumption going up 3.6% a year, 17 kilograms per capita. And once again, a larger proportion of that being eaten in very rich nations. The result, fish stocks are collapsing. 40% of our fish stocks have collapsed already. We're having to grow more. World grain production having to rise, but we run out of land. This is underpinned by increased use of fertilizer, driven by fossil fuel use to do that, not by a particularly great increase in land mass, because we run out of the places to which we can grow grain. That said, we are having to use more land. We're grazing more cattle. This is world meat production, rising steadily. Now standing at 45 kilograms of meat per person. Again, Western nations, developed nations, consuming far more than their rightful share. And growing those crops and keeping those cattle means we need to use more land. This is why rainforests are disappearing. And they're not disappearing slowly. That means more water. I'll let you look at these figures for yourselves. And as a result of this, the world has water crises pretty much everywhere, because a great deal of the water we consume comes from fossil aquifers. These are sealed reservoirs of water that once emptied do not refill. And when they go, large numbers of people suffer. And we know, for instance, that Saudi Arabia's grain crop fell by 71% shortly after the year 2000 because of the loss of that water, which is why they're having to buy land elsewhere. All of that means less life. This from the Living Planet Index, which there's a new one just released 2010 actually. These are the changes that have happened since I was 20 years old. This is the biggest mass extinction that the planet has seen on the fossil record, and we're living through it now. Our planet's very sick indeed. That patient is already teetering on the brink, and if it suffers another blow, it will die. Especially if that blow is sudden and severe. When you talk to most people, the medical students here did a survey of delegates and negotiators last year, and they said to them, do you think climate change is a problem for health? A very large number had no idea that climate change had anything to do with people. And those that did felt that it was probably something a bit to do with malaria, and, quote, the WHO can probably sort that out. There's a lot more to it. As temperatures rise, bacterial doubling rates increase, which is why you tend not to get so much diarrhea from eating chicken in England, which is generally a pretty chilly place, and you do if you go to warmer countries, because bacteria grow more quickly. The risk of malaria in some areas will definitely drop as swamps dry out and it becomes inclement, but in some areas it will rise. These were data, bear in mind, from low to mid-range estimates from 10 years ago. And as I've explained, we're way past those low-range estimates. So bear in mind, a lot of these scenarios are pathetically lightweight. Things will be much worse. Red represents the certainty of malarial transmission. And this was estimates on low to mid-range risk in the next 50 years. Why? Because in warmer climates, mosquitoes can live. As the temperature goes up, the malarial parasite replicates faster inside the mosquito, so the mosquito becomes infected more quickly. And this applies to other things like dengue. The viral incubation period shortens, the breeding cycle of the mosquito shortens, and they feed more frequently because they're buzzing around a lot more when it's warmer. Higher temperatures kill. We are evolved as multi-celled organisms over 540 million years to a very niche range of temperatures. And as temperatures rise, mortality rates rise. So these are just deaths in the United Kingdom. As it gets warmer, people die more. And you can see that anywhere in the world. These are data from Delhi, just a few seasons, showing seasonal changes. That as it gets warmer, people die, as it gets cooler, people don't. This is just a function of human biology. Increased baseline temperatures change levels of pollutants. And these are physicochemical reactions from pollutants. So tailpipe exhaust emissions in New York, concentrations of ozone rise, as temperatures rise. That's not because more cars are on the road, it's because of the nature of the chemistry of the atmosphere. And ground level ozone is very harmful to the respiratory tracts of humans. We change the way in which plant pollen is released. Pollen seasons lengthen. They start earlier, they go on longer. Many plants produce more pollen as it's warmer. And there is a shift in some species, and we're looking particularly at ragweed pollen, to much more allergenic forms of pollen around the world. But as you put more energy into a meteorological system, that energy appears in the form of weather. Now, the recent UN report said that it couldn't say with confidence that previous increases or recent increases in extreme weather events can be said to be due to climate change. But those of us that are scientists and physicians in this audience understand well that lack of evidence is not the same as evidence of lack. And somehow we have to account for this increase in extreme weather events over recent decades. And even in the United States, increase in tornadoes. The point I'm trying to make here is developed nations in many ways feel that they are secure from these effects of climate change, and they are not. Just as there's a global economy, we live in a global atmosphere, and every nation will be affected. I'm going to make reference to this report in the future. I just put it up there so that you know the source as we move forwards. Published in November of this year, last month. Cyclone wind intensity will increase as you warm ocean surfaces. Hurricanes become stronger. And we've seen strong hurricanes and the damage they cause. But we're going to see more of that sort of damage. We know that when you get these extreme weather events, soils become unstable due to drying, glacial retreat, sudden downpours, producing catastrophic landslide. These are likely to increase. High confidence. There's some myth about rainfall and climate that some areas will become less fertile because there'll be a little less water, it'll be warmer. Other areas will be more CO2, warmer, more rainfall, more crops. That's a nonsense, because even if you get that improvement in ability to grow crops, one sudden downfall, one big drought at the wrong time, and that crop is written off. And we're likely to see increases in severe precipitation events. And indeed, we are. I don't think we need to look further than Pakistan, which suffered horribly. A fifth of its land area underwater last year. Many, many millions of people affected and crops lost. We think of Vietnam and Thailand now, similarly affected, and their people suffering. Coastal flooding will worsen because of extreme storms, sea level rise, and so forth. This is likely to get worse. We're seeing these events already. And we're going to see more extreme heat waves. These are the anomalies for June 2010. Some areas cooler than you'd expect. Some areas, the red dots, very, very much warmer. August 2003, heat wave in Europe killed perhaps up to 75,000 people. And we're going to see more of these, according to that UN report. Look here. Very likely the length and intensity and severity of these heat waves will rise. A 1 in 20-year hottest day is likely to become a 1 in 2-year event. Think of Russia last year. Massive droughts leading to forest fires. Vast areas affected, crops failing. Large areas unable to export wheat. And these sorts of events, flooding, drought, extreme weather, means there's a shortage of food. Shortage of food makes it become more expensive. then people start speculating on the price of food, and it drives the price up further. Which is all very well if you live in central London on a doctor's salary. It's not acceptable when you're living on the breadline in a poorer nation state and you can no longer feed your family. We know from Nick Stern's data that climate change will be catastrophic to economies, and we know that poverty drives ill health. And we know that when you have starvation and drought and loss of habitation and disease and poverty, people will move. And when they move into other areas that are similarly distressed, you get conflict. This, even from 2003, from a Pentagon report, the result could be a significant drop in the human carrying capacity of the Earth's environment. That's talking about deaths. And they're not alone in saying this. We co-authored an article for the British Medical Journal just recently, drawing on statements from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, from the CIA, from organisations that you and I would perhaps not normally consider to be the most liberal organisations in the world. But they are concerned. I was deeply impressed with the Minister's words earlier on. I've been to many meetings about climate and health. He's, believe it or not, the first person I've heard that actually starts talking about ecosystem effects. Because we're at the top of an ecological pyramid, and if that collapses beneath us, our foundations are lost. Again, this paper now some 7 years old, and from what I've told you before, we're now exceeding the worst case scenarios that have been predicted by the IPCC earlier on. This happening on top of that mass extinction event about which I spoke earlier. So the question then, have we a terminal disease now? Or is there a cure? I don't know. If there is a cure, it's in your hands. And that's why you are the most important people in Durban today, because no one else is listening. And they have to listen, and they have to listen urgently to you. We need to inform patients, we need to inform our colleagues, we need to inform our politicians. Because if you work in health, unlike politicians generally in the world, or bankers, you're trusted to speak the truth. You must speak this truth of the risks, but also the benefits. In Western worlds, if we substitute driving for walking, we get reductions in diabetes, obesity, stroke, coronary vascular disease, peripheral vascular disease, hypertension, depression, dementia, breast cancer, bowel cancer. As a Western white male in Britain, the second most likely thing from which I will die is bowel cancer. And any of you who've seen someone die of that disease, it's horrible. The biggest preventable cause is saturated fat consumption from red meat and red meat consumption. Reducing those, taking more exercise, benefits the planet, and it benefits the health of our country, it benefits our health economics. We have a good selling point here, and Andy Haynes will be here this afternoon to show that not only does this apply to Europe, huge fiscal savings, but he modelled this around the world for different countries, of different levels of poverty, different cities, and showed, I won't go through these in detail, except to say, very big advantages wherever you are in the world. This is a convenient truth, and we need to communicate this. You need to take personal actions, and we need to advocate and engage. This is Jean-Paul Sartre, and I want to remind you of his words. It is not right to want to heal the suffering of people without committing to fight the very causes of that suffering. We have a responsibility here today to do this. We have a responsibility not to sit on the sidelines of these negotiations, to think that we're marginal to them. The health message is central. Our politicians must understand that people are suffering and dying now, and that very, 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 very many more will suffer and die in the future unless they act now. The talk about delays for 8 years are a frank nonsense, and we must say so to our ministers and to those that we know. These are personal thoughts. I'm not going to suggest that they're the thoughts of this conference, although there is a conference statement I'd encourage you to read and sign. We need to know what we're missing. We need to fill the gap. We need an urgent negotiated deal that's meaningful. We need to measure where we are. We need to put the money into the system. We need to make it available to those countries that need it. And we need to give them power over its use. And we need to sort out deforestation. Those are just headlines. They're personal views, but I think you may or may not agree. And we need to stand up for what's right. Waiting for everyone else to do something before you do does not show moral leadership. So, from where I come from, the EU, in my view, should just go ahead anyway, making its reductions. Finally, this statement will be circulated, is circulating. Some nation states have already signed up to it. We're asking negotiators in their opening plenary sessions to start their negotiations with these words. We'll circulate those for you. It will show solidarity amongst those states to say this is a matter of urgency. The point I want to make is that if we spend another 8 years with 40,000 delegates coming to COP processes such as this, neatly drafting a prescription for our planet, the patient will have died by the time we finish that prescription. And that matters. And it matters to me, and it matters to me personally. This is Fergus. He's my youngest son. And I love him every bit as much as you love your children or your grandchildren. And if you're not going to do this for other people's children, you must do it for your own. Because let me remind you, this isn't a joke. I think I've got Homo sapiens. Don't worry. They won't last for long. Thank you for listening.
We believe from the least developed countries and vulnerable communities that climate change is a moral problem. It's a problem created by the rich countries, rich people in poor countries, and a problem that the poor are going to suffer. Poor people in poor countries, but even poor people in rich countries. A stark example is the people of New Orleans who suffered at when Hurricane Katrina hit there. Over 1,000 people in the richest country died. They weren't rich people of New Orleans, they were the poorest people living in the 9th ward of New Orleans. So poor people, even in rich countries, are the ones that are most vulnerable. That's not right. That's a morally unacceptable situation where the rich cause suffering to the poor without taking responsibility for it.
In 1988, that's when we had Bill Molson, the founder of permaculture, who came from Australia. He held a workshop in Botswana on permaculture. And 2 of our guys, who are now our trustees, went to attend the workshop. And then after the workshop, that's when they turned this farm into a training center. And their main focus was permaculture. Permaculture means permanent agriculture. But it can be defined in many ways. Some say it's an approach to designing system which will give sustainable rewards. Right now, as permaculture is growing up We are now slowly getting into urban communities. We use natural resources for the production of our crops. For instance, for soil improving, we use this type of composting. We just harvest fresh cow dung, and then we put it in this container, we perforate it, and then put the dung in, and then introduce worms. After a period of 3 months, the worms will be doing the decomposition. They will be decomposing the stuff, and then after 3 months it will be ready. Then we take it and then put it in silids. We mix with sand and then put it. Then after those 3 months, the worms will be in abundance, and we could use them for feeding our poultry. And the extra we can take it for fishing or for raising, for fishing or for selling. Or we could introduce them in the garden. Because they will be in abundance. Nature is working for us.
Okay.
Sure. And then this system is called the container garden. It's ideal for those people who are residing in flats, who doesn't have where to do the cultivation. We just fill in an old sack with compost and a bit of soil. Then you perforate it and then you plant your vegetables. You are home and dry. And if you think of going for a holiday resort somewhere, just take it and then put it at the back of your truck. Then you'll be having fresh vegetables with you. These are herbs. Herbs are used in various ways. Some are used for culinary, some has got medicinal properties, some are used as repellents if planted with vegetables. For instance, we have this one. It's called Nasturtium. Some use it as just a flower, but it has got more properties than just being a flower. We use it to deworm our livestock. It's very, very, very useful. And for human beings, if you have got upset stomach, take the flowers and then chew them, swallow the juice. If you have got eye ailments, you could just take the flowers and then you put them in boiling water, let it cool, and then bath your eyes. It helps a lot. Then we have celery. This one we use it as a repellent again if planted with the brassicas. And apart from that, on medicinal properties, it suppresses BP. One is suffering from BP. If he takes this one regular on his or her diet, it reduces BP.
What is BP?
Blood pressure.
Oh, okay.
Blood pressure.
Celery.
Celery. And then this one is called thyme. Thyme, variegated thyme. This one is used for cooking, in fact. Apart from cooking, it has got many medicinal uses again. You could use it for whooping cough, you could use it for bronchitis, you could use it for headaches, or for boosting up one's immune system. If one, especially those, it could be AIDS victims, if they take this one, it helps them to boost their immune system. The lifespan will be a little bit prolonged if they take this one regular on their diet. It's very, very useful. Mint is in different varieties. We've got spearmint, we've got black mint, we've got peppermint. Right. It is used for sore throat. If somebody is suffering from sore throat, colds, flu, you could use this one. Just take it as herbal tea. Or if somebody is suffering from dizziness, you could just take a herbal tea of mint. It helps a lot. And then apart from that, if planted under fruit trees, it helps as a repellent of fruit flies. Plus, it's a very good soil binder. Wherever there is a little erosion taking place, if you plant it, it binds up the soil very well. That it reduces soil erosion. Called lemongrass. Lemon. Maybe the word lemongrass comes from that it has got a lemon flavor, and it smoothens the skin. Especially with the ladies, they like this one. Yeah. Acacia trees, they are termed as legumes. We use them in agroforestry, whereby we mix crops and trees. They are nitrogen fixers, and they are fodder. They can be used as windbreak. It doesn't shed the field. If planted with the crops tend to do very well. They can even grow very nice under these trees. They are very, very friendly. Except for the thorns. Sure. The group is the poor rural farmers. who doesn't have enough cash maybe to buy these so-called barbed wires, one could resort to this type of tree. It's called Doviaris scapula. It makes a very good live fence if planted close. It develops thorns, and by so doing it inhibits goats, donkeys to enter in a field. Very, very useful. And apart from being a shield, it produces fruits which could be taken, and they're very, very nice, very rich in vitamin C. For it. We have here is we have indigenous trees, be it indigenous fruit trees and then trees. And then we've got exotic trees, fruit trees and not fruit trees. And we have passion fruits and we have herbs. But generally, they are for generating income and improving sites within Fambizanai. Wherever we feel like there's bare land, we could just take them and then plant them to improve the site.
How does it improve the site?
Whenever a site is very bare, if you've got a massive downpour of rainfall, erosion takes place. But if you plant trees, the roots helps to bar the runoff and then let the water penetrate into the soil. And you could even introduce grass. You plant trees and then you plant grass. By so doing, erosion is minimized. That's how it improves the site. We plant our crops diversified. The reason being that we are trying to encourage a symbiosis friendship, whereby if you have got a nitrogen fixer, that nitrogen fixer will be fixing nitrogen, thereby benefiting the neighbor. It could be, in this case, it could be spinach. The nitrogen that is left by this bean is taken by the spinach, right? And at the same time, if I've got an outbreak of a certain disease, if that disease attacks spinach, at least you are left with beans. But if you've got just a field of spinach, if that disease comes, it wipes away everything and you are left with nothing. Those are the advantages of diversifying. And at the same time, we encourage farmers to cover the soil. The reason being that if the soil is covered, there is little runoff. And at the same time, there is much percolation. The temperature of the soil remains constant when the soil is covered. There is little evaporation. And at the same time, it decomposes as time goes by. It decomposes, and by so doing, it will be adding fertility into the soil.
So it's just grass?
You could use grass, you could use dead leaves, you could use live mulch, whatever you have. Because we are saying, it depends with the place you are. If you are in region 1, if you are in region 4, whatever you have there, make use of it. If you don't have even grass or leaves or whatever, you could use even stone mulching. But that one is ideal under fruit trees. You could use stone mulching. We also encourage farmers to dot a few fruit trees in their fields or in their gardens. Right. If you compare the production that you get from one tree and the production that you get on a piece of land planted vegetables, you could see that from a tree you get huge sums of money. So we encourage farmers to dot a few fruit trees into their system for boosting income.
What kind of tree is this one?
It's macadamia nut.
Which one?
That one. Macadamia nut.
Very,
very expensive. A kg you could buy it at something like $300 and something dollars. Very, very expensive. Okay, this one is called Leucaena. It's a nitrogen fixer, and at the same time it's fodder. At the same time it's working as hedge here. In permaculture we say at least one element should serve many functions. Right. So apart from just being hedge here, it is barring diseases. The other diseases that travel with wind, like blight. So whenever you have a hedge in your garden, that disease could be trapped here and then doesn't get to your vegetables or crops or whatever. At this time of the year, there is outbreak of pests. Vegetables doesn't do very well. We are leaving this so that we could feed our livestock because we believe in recycling. We take waste from the garden and then we feed our livestock, and then in return we get manure. We put it on a compost, we re-put it, we reapply it into the garden. So it's sort of a cycle. You could see some of the farmers taking off these old vegetables, throwing them away. That's not a good idea. Recycle it so that it gives benefits again back to that land where you harvested it. Humus. Then after that, you put a heavy feeder. It could be maize, so that it makes use of the nitrogen that is left by the prior plant.
Yeah.
It's a peach. It's called the elderberry. The flowers are used if somebody is suffering from a heavy flu. You could use those flowers. And the leaves are used for making compost, very rich in nitrogen. And you could use it as hedge again. So hedges are very, very important for stopping wind erosion.
Yeah.
And trees should be shaped in a way that it will become easy for one to harvest. It will become easy for one to spray. So we don't encourage farmers to leave trees growing high up. It will be very difficult for them to harvest. And at the same time, they end up having their kids having fractures because they climb up there, which is very, very much dangerous. So in the necessary course that we give, we train them that they should train their tree. A tree can behave in the way you want if you train it, but if you leave it, it will give you problems. So this is the result of training. The branches are growing sidewise. It's very easy to harvest. You can even harvest when you are standing. You can even spray when you are standing. We make organic remedies. You could spray with hot pepper mixed with a bit of soap, or you could use tephrosia. Tephrosia is one of the most tree that we use here, which is more powerful on whatever pests. Be it bagrada bugs, be it grasshoppers, be it what, it's a sweeper, we call it a sweeper. And we use it as a last resort. Sure. So whenever we have an outbreak, we use that one. So we make what we call liquid manure. What we simply do is we find a container and then take fresh cow dung and then put it in a container, add a bit of water, and then leave it to stay for about 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, you sort of spear it. Yeah, that's organic farming. And then you take this stuff and then apply it on your crops. You dilute it 1:2 with fresh water, and then you apply it on your crops. But the most powerful one is the one made from chicken droppings. You just harvest the chicken droppings, you put in a sack, and then you put in a drum. You add water. You leave it for 2 weeks again, and then you top dress your crops. But with liquid manure, you go to dilute the one that is made from chicken droppings 1:5 because it's so powerful. If you don't dilute, otherwise everything will be burned. It's very, very powerful.
That's for the flies, huh?
Sure. This is what we call stone mulching. If you've got problems with chickens scratching at the base of a fruit tree, just put stone mulching and you are home and dry. And at the same time, it's acting as a habitat for lizards. Because in organic farming, we also need what we call predators. They help us in reducing the number of pests. So this is a home for lizards, be it snakes. You know, snakes are very good for controlling mice. So this is the ideal home for our predators. Be prepared for them. If you put fertilizer, yes, you get quick results, but the taste is awful. But if you use manure, it gives a wonderful taste. The taste is just perfect. Remedies on spraying is that whenever you have a customer or you have visitors during the night, you can pick up the leaves because you would have used chilies or hot pepper to do the spraying, which is something eatable. You can just wash that chilies and then you prepare for your customer or for your visitor. But if you use Roga or these synthetic chemicals, if it is 21 days before harvest, you got to wait for those 21 days. But we are having problems because most of the rural farmers, they are money hungry. So they sometimes cheat. Rather than waiting for those 21 days, you could see him waiting for about 15 days and then start harvesting and then selling for the sake of money. But look, what will happen? All those people who consume those vegetables will end up having problems just for the sake of money. But if you go organic, you could do spray and then at the same time harvest, no problem.
Fig tree.
It bears fruits and then the fruits turn red when they are ripe. By so doing, they attract birds. And then whenever we have birds in here, birds rather than feeding on the figs, they could end up picking up pests. It could be butterflies, it could be grasshoppers, they end up picking them. So it's serving main functions here. It's a fruit tree, and at the same time it's attracting birds. The birds in return will feed on pests. This is called yarrow. It's a herb. It's called yarrow. Yarrow is a very good plant if mixed with the brassicas, because it produces a certain odor which is not liked by pests. So it will be acting as a repellent here. And at the same time, it's a painkiller. If somebody is suffering from anything, you could just take a herbal tea of it and then it eases the pain. It's very good again on bleeding. If somebody is bleeding, you just rub the leaves and then put them on that wound. Automatically the blood will clot. It promotes clotting of the blood. So rather than going to the nearby clinics, we have everything here. Yeah, we have everything. Maybe when somebody is dying, maybe that's when we could rush that person to the hospital. But otherwise, we would have tried all means by using the natural stuff we have here. Okay, this long grass is called vetiver grass. It is a very good soil binder. Wherever there are gullies, or if you want to go on gully reclamation, we advise farmers to use this one, because if it establishes very well, the roots can go up to 1.5 meters. And it bars runoff very, very, very effectively. And apart from controlling soil erosion, we use it to control moles. Whenever we have moles in a piece of land, you just plant a row of these and then a row of those somewhere there. Then you could kill the moles that are found in between. And then those from there or from wherever, they cannot pass through the rows because of the smell it gives. It's not liked by moles. So it's a repeller of moles. The connection of the ecosystem, they'll be seeing everything. So they prefer using these outdoor classrooms. Closely, we build what you call a chicken tractor. It's just a small wooden thing with a bit of fence, so that we keep the chickens at one place and then we put the chickens in. The chickens will scratch, that is picking whatever pest they could find. And at the same time, they'll be dropping their droppings, that is fertilizing the soil, and then weeding. The grazing or the taking of the whatever is growing there, that's fine for us. So after a period of maybe 2 weeks, we move it, put it in another place, we plant something there. It means that place is pest-free, it's manured, and it's weeded or it's cultivated already. And that's how we use chickens in the system of permaculture. Then we come to biogas. We encourage farmers to use these biogases in rural areas as a way of getting fuel. Because after independence, most of the farmers, the rural farmers, they went on a rampage of destroying the environment, having piles and piles of firewood, forgetting that tomorrow they won't have anything to resort on. So we are coming on with this project of biogases, whereby they could use fresh cow dung, feed in, and then get methane gas, and use it for cooking and lighting as well.
So there's methane coming out of that tube?
Yeah, sure, there's methane coming out from that.
And where's it going?
It's going into that house and being used in there for cooking and lighting.
Amazing, huh?
So what's in there?
Methane.
Yeah, but like, how do you get it?
Then we have the inlet there, where we pour, it could be kitchen leftovers, fresh cow dung, we mix with a bit of water, it forms porridge form, and then we pour it in. When it comes here, there are those anaerobic bacteria which does the decomposition. And then the product that we get is methane gas, and then it's piped into that house.
Wow.
The waste it comes through the outlet. We take it as celery. It could be used as liquid manure. Then we take the waste and then we apply it on crops as liquid manure. So in permaculture, we don't throw away anything. We make use of everything. Yeah, sure. Make use of everything.
Beautiful stuff.
We have cattle. Those are the ones that does the grazing. And then we have pigs. We used to have goats. We just buy them and then fatten them and then sell them as a way of generating income. We harvest seeds from the fields, be it in the garden, be it in the fields, seeds of trees, seeds of vegetables. We bring them in here, we store them there, and then we could sell them to our visitors or customers and then the extra we could replant it in the garden, so that we become self-reliant. We are promoting self-reliance. We have courses that runs for 1 week, and then some runs for 2 weeks. And these bricks are called SSBs, soil stabilized blocks. They've got a cement element in them, and they can last for a long time. They are very cheap to produce. And they can stay for a long time as long as they don't get wet. But even if they get wet, because of the properties of cement that is inside, they become much stronger. And as I said earlier on, that our target group is the poor rural farmer. If you look at our structures, they are made in a way that even the rural farmer can afford. Look at the ceiling; it's made of reeds, many reeds that are found in rivers. It's not very expensive. The window frames is just planks, but at least the house is presentable. It's not all that bad. It's presentable. Yeah. So we are encouraging farmers at our level best to use local available resources. Something that doesn't pump out money, because money is easy to get these days. Water that is harvested from the roof is diverted into these pits. These are water harvesting pits. We believe in permaculture that water which is above the ground is destructive, because if it joins forces, it can even sweep away a house. You know, the floods. So we try by all means to encourage farmers to let all runoff sink.
Straight away.
Let it sink, and then if it sinks, it becomes productive, because it will rise up again at night, and it will recharge the water tables. Then by so doing, you'll be having perennial boreholes. But if you leave it flowing, going away, it's lost forever. You'll never get it again.
So these are people's houses here, huh?
Yes, these are people's houses. This is just a model village whereby we are trying to show the farmers how they can set up their homes or their houses. We have the bedroom facing the northern hemisphere. It's because the sun here in Zimbabwe, it follows this direction. So if you build a house this way, it means only one room is going to get enough sunlight. The rest will be dark. So if you build it this way, at least all rooms will get enough sunlight. And at the same time, water that is harvested from there is diverted again into that pit. The whole system is called the pit bed. All the kitchen waste are thrown in there, and then with the help of the water that is harvested from the roof into there, it decomposes quickly. And then after that, it will be manure. Then we retake the manure and then reapply on beds.
How does the water get there? Through the gutters?
Through this drain.
Drain.
Then the water that is harvested from that bedroom goes through the gutters into that tank. Unfortunately, we are not using the tank so far. Then you could use that water for washing your clothes or your plates.
And what about drinking water?
Drinking water, we get it from an electric borehole. It's somewhere there. And then as for soil preparation, we also have this herb here. It's called stinging nettle. Stinging nettle. We use this one to make liquid manure. Earlier on I said you can make liquid manure out of chicken droppings or fresh cow dung. But if you don't have all those, you could resort to this one. This one or Russian camphor. It's very, very rich in potassium, very rich in nitrogen. What you simply do is you harvest the leaves, you put them in a container. Then, due to fermentation, it decomposes. The liquid that you get is what we term liquid manure. And you can dilute it with fresh water, 1:1. And then you apply on your crops. Apart from making liquid manure, it's a very good suppressor of sugar diabetes. If somebody is sugar diabetic, you could resort to this one. Just make a herbal tea, and then you put a bit of honey, then you take it. It suppresses the disease. Blood poisoning, it also helps. And again, it's a repellent of snakes. Those who are in Zimbabwe who are living in region 4 or 5, there are lots of snakes. So you can just make a small jura of this one, because snakes doesn't penetrate on it. Maybe it's because of the spikes or whatever. It doesn't like snakes, and you could hardly find one crossing this one. So it's a very good repellent of snakes. We don't believe in plowing because if you turn up the soil, after 5-6 years, the soil becomes exhausted. It quickly becomes exhausted. Maybe what we encourage is we can do plowing maybe on staggering years. Maybe after 3 years you plow, after 3 years you plow. Or on these other years you could practice what we call minimum tillage, where there is little disturbance of the soil, so that the soil will remain intact. Holst building materials. This one is called the rope and washer pump. Just maybe a simple borehole that is a bit advanced. It sucks water from the permanent water table using this rope. This rope has got washers. These washers. And these washers are at every 75 interval. So it rotates into the water table. Then it comes out through this PVC pipe. The volume of the PVC pipe is just similarly the same with the size of the washers. So whenever it sucks water from the water table, that water eventually comes out as you'll be rotating. It's working.
That's pure water, huh?
Yes, that's pure water.
That's absolutely fantastic, man. Jeez, you guys are so clever.
Yeah.
So I'm Alicia Harold-Coley, a marine scientist with Oceana, and we're very concerned about ocean acidification, which is the oceans becoming more acidic because they're absorbing carbon dioxide. And this higher acidity has negative impacts for many marine species and can possibly even cause crashes in marine ecosystems, marine food webs. We're looking at the possible decline, possible extinction even, of coral reefs by the end of this century. So we're extremely concerned about the oceans becoming more acidic. So the oceans absorb carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide bonds with ocean water to create an acid, carbonic acid. And that is how the oceans are becoming more acidic. And people, it's really important that individuals act by themselves to reduce their carbon emissions, but even more importantly, they need to be telling their policymakers, the people here today who are in Cancun deciding what the future is going to be for the whole world, that they demand their policymakers really set low emissions and really reduce their emission targets for the future.
It's very weird. We're over there. Okay, and you came in through a gate up there. And there's up there. And there's all the milkwood forest there, and there's a nice big milkwood forest there. The idea is actually there's a small fence there, is to cut this off. This is for agricultural integrated farming, and this is 700 hectare to get it back as natural as possible. This is all game fence. The whole thing is game fence, which I found out yesterday that I need to get a permit now. That they must come out and they must inspect my game fence for me.
But hang on a sec, John, wasn't you telling us that they're finding out that fynbos is much more nutritious for many more animals than even the regular things that they've been eating up till now?
Yeah, especially the game. Or yeah, and that's fine. And they're doing that, and they're eating there, and it's fine. I mean, all I have to do with the game, because they're all browsers, all I have to do with the game is give them a lick, which just clears any, it's a lot of cactus in it, and I put some carbon into it. We'll make up our own licks. Just to keep them healthy as far as parasites go, as much as possible. And that's fine. I don't give any other feed to them. But I'm talking about feeding into the local community, which is grains, dairy. How are we going to do that then? And I don't, frankly, don't really hold too much what nature conservation is saying. I'm going to do it anyway. Because within my own integrity, I feel a 10% or even less, 8% payoff of utilizing the land to maintain 700 hectares of pristine land is a fair swap.
Actually, I mean, for example, in our area, Stellenbosch area, it's the other way around, is they are trying to persuade farmers to put 10% to pristine.
Yeah.
So your figures are inverted.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really give too much a hoot to what nature conservation is. I feel that my integrity.
I have a funny feeling that nature conservation are locked into a few strange paradigms.
Yeah.
What would you say were the paradigms?
Well, in short, I say there's an element of a kind of eco-fascism. They're not thinking holistically. I mean, you've pointed out is the sustainability. Sustainability is a major issue. How do you sustain, and there's a financial element as well as all the ecological elements and here we have an environment that's as close to pristine as you'll probably ever get. And in an environment like this, you can see living water. And it's such a contrast to what you find in most agricultural systems, where water is invisible. It's almost entirely vanished from the soil. And all we really saw when we were passing through a lot of those agricultural lands was a lot of bare soil. And really, it's not surprising that our health in the national population is declining so much, is when we have food coming from such an impoverished environment. What's been shown in recent years with the movement and the interest in probiotic foods is the significance of having a healthy soil, in that a healthy food is in fact a home for a host of beneficial bacteria and fungi or microflora that are essential for our health. And once you start depleting a soil of its soil life, it doesn't become possible for the food from that area to have those populations of beneficial microflora in them. It's also what you're getting now is a wheat plant, for example, in that when we're going through the wheatlands, is so far removed from the original kinds of wheat that were cultivated and eaten by people. And that really applies across the board of all the varieties of food that we're eating, in that most of the products now are hardly recognizable compared to the original varieties that we were eating. But it's even seen and actually become in certain parts quite fashionable amongst chefs that it's the probiotic or the biotic elements, the flora that are contained within a food plant that give it the more subtle and tasty qualities that are appreciated by the fashion in cooking these days and are so vital to our health. It seems strange that we have to go and buy from the chemist a formulation of microorganisms, whereas if we only chose correctly, we could be eating homegrown organic food that contains the same kind of microflora that now a modern person in the city has to go and purchase over the counter at the pharmacy. Yeah, I mean, we have a pandemic of diabetes, a whole lot of other health complaints, an increase in cancers, a whole lot of reproductive problems that can be directly correlated to a poor diet and a diet of often very questionable products, particularly, I would say, on the genetically modified foods. And yet no one is taking any notice of the warning signs that are there where populations are eating those foods. You know, and it's not going to be your chemical tests, like I've seen some comparisons done where there's not a discernible difference in terms of chemical properties between foods, but very little testing is ever done on the biotic component of foods. There are some tests, such as the Brix tests, which are used in the wine industry, which do show a significant difference. But yet it's those probiotic elements, and each of those bacteria have a whole genetic formulation, in a sense, imprint that activates our own health and immune system and gives a resistance to disease. Yeah, but I think what's more important is what we were saying with Luke, Judy, in that, you know, just think of what he's done. Like a small area like that, and he's feeding how many people? 20 people. You know?
Imagine if he
in
took
a sense,
little bit more land and did more.
Yeah, but
feed a lot of people.
But is that the option? To go on a model, you're still going to have to transport everything around?
Yeah, but it could be done nearby where everybody lives. However many people there are, you have that much space.
An insane situation where large numbers of people move from highly fertile, well-watered areas into urban slums where there is massive desertification, huge endemics of disease and health problems. They have a poor diet. They live incredibly stressful lives. Whereas if communities were encouraged to develop the areas that they came from, you would have a massively healthier population. There wouldn't be issues of unemployment because you are engaged actively in providing your sustenance and shelter. There wouldn't be any of the same kind of social stresses and so on that exist. And they would be eating healthy food daily. You know, in areas that have the greatest potential. So we've got things upside down in a sense. We have the Western Cape where land is the most expensive, and yet even from a conventional perspective it's the least productive agricultural land. And yet daily we have a massive mushrooming of the population on a piece of ground that cannot really sustain it. Both in terms of water, the energy question, we then have compounded problems of pollution, and never mind all the multitude of social issues of a large concentration of people who don't really have employment. It would definitely, I really admire those initiatives that have taken place in those communities to provide food and income, because there is such a premium now on producing food, and the cost of food is escalating almost daily. So those initiatives that have taken place in our high-density suburbs of the Western Cape are actually doing extremely well in that they are generating a fair income and showing that it is possible to produce food under extreme conditions. And perhaps one of the most remarkable things about the Western Cape is how much it can produce on what is considered, from conventional terms, poor soil. And yet the Cape sustains a massive population and, relatively speaking, has a massive production. And if those kind of efforts were applied in the more naturally fertile parts of the country, this country, I think, would be the breadbasket of Africa. As it stands, we're facing a crisis of having to import most of our food.
What about the water here?
Well, here you've got living water. If you look at the water, it's moving and swirling and pulsing. There's light and dark. And this is the kind of water that, from a biological perspective, is able to bring nutrients and bring health and carry and sustain life. When you have water that has gone through an industrial process, the molecules of water are in a chaotic state and are not able to carry the active minerals or nutrients that they are. They also don't have the health-giving properties that a living water like this would have. And water such as this has the abilities to sustain plants, whereas water that is being denatured and with life destroyed out of it is not able to sustain life, or you certainly need a great deal more volume than you would with living water such as this.
Have you ever seen the results of the difference of plants fed with one and plants fed with the other?
The most dramatic example of that really occurs with rainfall. It's extraordinary. Like the other day we had a light rain of less than 3 millimeters in the garden that I'm responsible for nurturing at the moment. And yet for 2-3 days afterwards there was no need to do any irrigation, and all of the plants perked up noticeably. There was a visible increase in growth and a kind of vibrancy to the foliage of the plants in the garden. Whereas you can during the more harsher periods when there was no rainfall. You can irrigate like mad, and somehow that vitality in the plants was not as evident as a mere shower of 3 millimeters of rain.
What do you put that down to?
Living water is that water that goes through the natural water cycle and is activated by the process of precipitation, the flow forms that are taking place in cloud, and so you have biologically active living water. Whereas water that's gone through an irrigation system is contaminated with pollutants. It's dead water, it's been sitting in a reservoir, so it's not circulating, and simply does not have the quality that natural rainfall has on a plant.
If you were to make a proposal of what is the best way of utilizing our precious water in a time of extreme drought, in the best possible way we can to produce just the most nutrient foods in the best way, how would you recommend we spend that water?
Well, we have a number of anomalies. We use massive volumes of water in industry. We use massive volumes of water in domestic situations. We have a situation in the Western Cape where water is distributed at random through the townships without any charge. And it's not surprising then that you find that in the Western Cape is using almost up to 40% of its capacity water a year. And actually the highest proportion is to the city. I mean, I think it's a fallacy that the farmers are using it all up. It's urban developments. One of the most inefficient uses of water takes place on a thing like a golf course, or what I call green deserts and lawns, where massive volumes of water are pumped out onto a surface. They then move through the system and end up causing drainage problems. So our design on the water system is short and lacking. I know for certain that the same amount of water that is applied, for example, onto a golf course could sustain quite a number of hectares of food production. And I mean, what I've seen with a polyculture organic system, a hectare of organically grown food can yield about R250,000 rand per annum of valuable product. That's using last year's figures. And if we consider the inflation of costs of food, that's going to escalate. Compared to the returns from a piece of open grassland on a golf course, I doubt whether the subscriptions are going to match that kind of income generation or necessity generation. Whereas the subscriptions are really just pandering to a very elite selection of the population and not benefiting the population as a whole. And it gets compounded further by the kind of addiction to chemicals that takes place in that kind of environment, of massive applications of fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, and so forth, to maintain that situation. So really, a situation like that is one of, from an ecological perspective, the greatest disasters we're facing. And with very simple planning, if those resources were recycled into a food production system, we would have a great deal more satisfactory situation in terms of nutrition for the population in that area. No, I haven't.
What do you wish for this country?
That it's flourishing. Definitely. That the country flourishes to its potential. I mean, actually, this country has incredible potential. It really does. And that includes the human resources, as well as all our natural resources. It's well blessed with natural resources. It's a splendid place. And it really should be flourishing.
What should governments ban or promote that would work? That would help us get ourselves out of the shit. What would you say? Tell us a few things.
I think it has to start with communities. You have to empower communities to take hold of their own destiny instead of becoming dependents. That's very important, and there's a holistic, it's definitely a holistic approach would be needed. We should thrive on our diversity instead of nitpicking in our diversity. And I'm talking here of populations. Populations should be allowed to nurture themselves instead of forming into lagers that are feeling constantly threatened. I think a rethink on urbanization is desperately needed, personally. It's not a mode that has worked anywhere satisfactorily throughout our cultural history. Most metropolitan cultures have ended up extinct, and we should really learn from that. It seems that we failed to learn from it. I don't think there's an exception to that. We kind of think that New York is beautiful and wonderful and it's going to last forever. But there's no ways a metropolitan area that large, and we could speak of more local urban centers, can sustain themselves. They are entirely dependent on importing their requirements. And with the kind of culture of plundering our resources instead of respecting and nurturing our resources, they're going to run out. Resources are going to run out, and urban centers are going to face even more extreme crises than they're going to face at the moment. And that we should see that. And we should take steps to develop a society where, if you like, the load is spread, and we have many more smaller, more balanced communities.
Population control?
Autonomous. Versus globalization.
Funny enough, I think there's something very anti-life about population control. That's my own personal opinion.
It's because you've got 5 kids.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it is, but I think there's something anti-life about it. It's true that the escalation of the human population is alarming, but is it alarming because of the concentrations of people in urban centers, or is it alarming simply because of the increase in numbers? Is it alarming because of the plundering of the planet? Okay, that increased population would, in a sense, people think implicitly imply. Or is it actually the industrial mode that is the danger? And personally, I would tend to think it's our industrial mode that is the problem.
So you think it's actually possible for us to continue to have continually and forever escalating population tumors?
No, it can't happen.
Then at what point would you say this anti-life thing would kick in?
Nature's going to kick in anyway, whether we like it or not. There will be natural controls coming in. They might be shocking. Maybe they are kicking in with the massive health problems that are occurring in the first world. It's nature's way of kicking back and trying to balance things out. So you could almost say is that high concentration of people is asking for pathology of some sort or another. Some disease, some crisis is inevitable.
Globalization?
Yeah, I think it's an insidious arrangement.
It's terrible.
I do. Because it's
would you
tied.
Would you ban monoculture?
Look, it's on terminology. Generally, look, a golf course is a monoculture. No, I don't think it's healthy. It's elitism applied to plants. You know, so society's elitism is transferred and manifested in its mode of agriculture. It's a kind of elitism, very much so, on many levels, economic, social, product. Eliminate competitors. I mean, what's shocking is the loss of diversity. We should cherish diversity and not eliminate it.
Diversity, smursty, who cares? What would you say to that?
I laugh at the ignorance of the comment. Or I smile. There's a rather sinister element to it, but really shame on the person who is seeing the world like that.
I spoke to an environmentalist who told me, oh no, look, we've already accepted that there's going to be a harming species, but that's okay. Do you think that that is just them being practical, or do you think it's them given basically shouldn't be call themselves environmentalists?
I think they're speaking from a comfortable perspective and have never really faced life-threatening situations. Because if they had faced life-threatening situations, they wouldn't make a remark like that. So that is a very comfortable elitist position. Yeah, there's a smugness to it that's actually tragically unrealistic. That person is extremely naive about how harsh life can be for most of the population.
Do you think we're better off now than we were 50 years plus ago?
No, not really, no. I might even say that we're worse off. I don't think technology has really contributed as much as it makes out that it has contributed. If you consider in the last 50 years the loss of habitat and natural resources, the massive utilization of finite fuel, no. We're still engaged in warfare. No. If anything, I think the desertification of the planet is far more alarming in the last 50 years than it has ever been. And I don't mean desertification, I mean it in every single respect. Creativity, I think, has diminished. So there's been a kind of desertification of creativity. We have mass-produced creativity. And so the initiative of individuals to be creative has been lost. And that, I think, is one of the most tragic things. And then there's desertification, quite literally, of our environment, where environment has become totally degraded. And that has escalated in the last 50 years. I don't think health problems have been solved by technology, as they're alleged to be done. I don't think wealth is a very good indicator, because we seem to have almost more poverty than we had 50 years ago. And people might have lived mighty simple lives, but that sense of impoverishment was not there. That has escalated. So even though people lived a lot very simple, humble lives, they were a great deal more content, healthier, and more creative.
What do you teach your children about, what do you wish for your children to do about the future, if anything? Do you think it's not their problem? Or do you hope that they somehow can undo what's been done?
I hope they have the initiative and creativity to deal with the challenges that are undoubtedly going to be presented to them. I think, in a sense, as a guidance with my children, we have had adventures. We've tried to teach the children to deal with challenges. And I think that's very important. So, for example, the challenges of a new country, a new language, being able to adapt. So I think that's the most important thing, is to be lively enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And one can only hope that they survive and flourish.
Why is the Ganges almost over? Because the glacier is melting 1,000 times faster than it was predicted to melt. So it's already gone in by about 5 kilometers. Now it's happened now in today's news. You have seen that the Alps have got no snow this year. As the Alps get no snow, Europe gets no water.